Session of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to order, and so it's a great opportunity for us to talk about some issues that have been occupying a lot of the agency's time, and so I look forward to having a great conversation that we can't have outside of these formal meetings, and so I'm looking forward to that. It's 9:31. Today is December the 14th, 2017. With us today are Commissioner Toby Baker, Commissioner John Neerman. I'm Brian Shaw, and our General Counsel Tucker Royal, as well as around the table a lot of staff, both from TCQ as well as Chief Nim Kidd with TDM, who's here. And so thank you for coming along, and we certainly always enjoy visiting with you and look forward to hearing your insight as well as assessment of how things worked well and where improvements can be made. So, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Our first item is the review and discussion of the agency response to Hurricane Harvey, and Kelly Cook is going to kick it off this morning.
Morning.
Morning, Commissioners. To kick off our discussion this morning, we thought it would be really good to start with a discussion of the state's perspective of the hurricane response. Today we have with us a special guest, Chief Nim Kidd, who is the director of the Texas Division of Emergency Management. And Nim has graciously agreed to come and talk to us about the hurricane, some state updates, maybe some aspects of the successes and challenges. So without further ado, I'm going to recognize and turn it over to Chief Kidd.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning.
Morning.
Is this public record?
Yes.
All right, so for the record, my name is Nim Kidd. I'm Chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management. Howdy. Howdy. That's pretty good. I mean, it was all right, I guess. I'm sorry I did not adhere to the dress code this morning. I was informed last night of what I was supposed to wear, but a lot of y'all know I spent 20 years with the San Antonio Fire Department wearing a uniform. So in 2010, when I came to TDM, I decided I still needed a uniform. So just about every day I wear a black suit, a white shirt, and whatever tie my wife lays out for me. So I'm in uniform today, Chairman. And my wife is very proud of me for being in uniform today, although I wish I had adopted the dress code. First and foremost, I want to come here to say thank you. You and I have spent a lot of time together. Richard and I have spent a lot of time together. Kelly and I have spent a lot of time together. But I've spent more time with Michelle than with all of y'all combined. So Michelle, thank you for all of the hours over at the SOC. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, you have been a constant there. TCEQ, through your position, really leads the way for a lot of the state agencies and what representation at the SOC should look like. So thank you for that. There's a lot that happened during this response. I think most of us plan and have for years planned on the H-120 timeline. Does that mean something to y'all? So this means yes, this means no, this means I don't know what you're talking about, right? And when we go back and we started having conversations on that Sunday before the Friday landfall, and then we started having conference calls that Monday before the Friday landfall. But it wasn't until Thursday morning at 10 o'clock before the National Hurricane Center updated the forecast from a high-end tropical storm to a low-end Cat 1 to what they thought it might be more. Now, that didn't mean, and y'all may be aware, we use a private sector forecaster because it's been my experience that the National Hurricane Center really wants to be pure scientists with very little art in their forecast. And so that prohibited us from having more public outreach during those 3 days that led up when we were already starting to watch the storm and move in buses and move in ambulances, but didn't get the local official attention like we needed. Because as y'all are probably very well aware, under our state law, there's only two people that have the statutory authority to mandate an evacuation. If you live in the city or in a city limits, it's the mayor. And if you live in the unincorporated area of the county, it's the county judge. The governor does not have statutory authority to mandate an evacuation in Texas. That's why it's so important that we have our local officials connected and working together. There was Wednesday afternoon, we had the National Hurricane Center on the line. I had the mayor of Corpus Christi, the Nueces County judge all on the phone. I had the FEMA regional administrator. We're trying to urge them to step up their notice. And they went to the website of the National Hurricane Center and says, it's still projected to be a tropical storm, Nim. Last Wednesday, we had 60-mile-an-hour winds here. This is nothing. So that whole H-120, that 5-day planning, just went right out the window, and we wound up with notice of a major storm at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning. Now, if we were tracking time, that would be in about 30 minutes from now. There'd have been a bunch of people at work, a bunch of kids at school, life's getting ready to go on, and now they want to start issuing evacuation orders, and then everybody wonders why we didn't evacuate early enough. That's the logistics and timeline of how it happened. Now, that thing hit us 3 different times, right? Came on as a Category 4 at landfall at about 7 o'clock on Friday morning in the Corpus, just north of Corpus Christi. Then stayed up. Normally you do 5 days of planning for a 2-day event. In this case, we had 2 days of planning for a 5-day event because of how much it stayed on land, the rain that it dropped, coming back around into the Victoria area, and then going back up into the Houston area, and then one more time in the Beaumont, Port Arthur area. Major storm, FEMA estimated this storm will be an $18.5 billion FEMA expense. So there's going to be a lot of people that show different numbers about total damages and economic impact and revenue lost. The fact of the matter is this will probably be the largest storm Texas has ever experienced, and maybe the nation. I think it's bigger than Katrina already, bigger than Ike, and bigger than Sandy. And so when we look at the FEMA damages and the FEMA expenses, I think this will be 2.5 to 3 times what Ike and Rita was combined. So that's the bad stuff. Now the good stuff is the state agencies responded pretty darn well. Our local government partners joined up and responded pretty darn well. I think from a response perspective, there is, hindsight's always 20/20. I hope that, I'm going to ask you what we need to do different here in a few minutes, and I hope you'll tell me. But from our perspective right now, the response itself came off very well. Everybody came together. Everybody worked together. I heard very little infighting. Normally, you always see turf wars. There were no turf wars. Everybody was focused on the same mission, everybody pushing forward together and supporting our local governments. One of the things that I want us to keep striving to do, and I think y'all do a great job already, but we can always get better, is at each of the disaster district committee levels, we've got to make sure that we have locked in tight at each of the DDCs with the highway patrol captain today and the district coordinators that are there, that all of the state agencies come and support those DDCs just like we have representatives supporting the SOC. And to make sure that they are trained, they understand ICS, they understand incident management. One of the things that I'm pushing the DDC chairs and the district coordinators to do is a little more regular exercises. This was the first time in the Beaumont-Port Arthur area that we were scheduled to do low to no notice exercise events at each DDC. And what we find is a lot of the state agencies, a couple years ago, Richard, I think we sent out a survey asking for the names of the people that were going to go to each of the 30 DDCs. Y'all did a great job, but some of the state agencies put the same name in every box. For every DDC, for every operational period, it was the same Kelly Cook. Kelly, you must have a lot of Kellys out there, but they kept putting it down like, apparently you don't understand. I need 2 or 3 of you at each of these locations at any given time. And so I think that's where, if we can keep dividing that out, Texas Military Department does a good job of that. They pre-assign military district coordinators to each of the regions. So that's something that I'm going to keep us striving for with all state agencies. Debris was killer. Our debris estimate right now, I think, is at 50% picked up. That number's gone up to 50% for 2 reasons. One, we've picked up a lot of debris. The other is the estimate has come down. We went from 30 million cubic yards to a better estimate of 22 million cubic yards. I can't thank y'all enough for the work in quick permitting of temporary sites. That has been one of the biggest things that I think has been a success. The governor's been able to brag about that. John Sharp, the commissioner to Rebuild Texas, has been able to brag about that. I'm able to brag about it. What do we do, 200 and plus? 213, 214, whatever it takes? Okay. That was a joke from a movie back a long time, except it was, y'all don't remember that, do you? 220, 221, whatever it takes? Okay. So I think it's been a great deal. In this process, we have purchased at the state level 6 of the box burners, not the trench piece, but the box itself. We're going to work with TxDOT as well as the Forest Service to figure out who owns them, who transports them, who operates them. We need a great partnership with y'all as we keep moving forward with that, because what I want to do in the next event, the next debris plan, is start burning on day one. Let's find the sites and start moving it. Let's not let it sit. I think we've got to figure out a smarter way, or maybe a different way to work on CD, the construction and demolition debris pieces, and figure out what we do with that. As a firefighter, I want to burn it. Thank y'all for not letting me burn it so I don't get in trouble. But burn it all, you know, that's my mindset. So thank you for not letting me get in trouble. And just keep moving forward together. I mean, the hazardous materials piece of it, you guys have been so interwoven in everything that we do. The purposeful demolition of chemicals is kind of exciting. Y'all know we blew up parts of I-10 too, right? Yeah, that was kind of cool. If you haven't seen the video, I'll send it to you. It's kind of impressive. But just the partnership that we've had and working together over all the years and all the events. It's funny, Kelly and I were talking. I still think he likes to brag about being the only guy that's ever woke me up on a phone call in the middle of the night.
And survive.
And, well, yeah, he's a big guy. I'm not going to mess with him. You know, Kelly and I really started working together many years ago from the Helotes mulch fire. And so it's interesting now that we're trying to burn debris as fast as we can, not to have that all over again. So, you know, I think, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I want to hear from you as well as all of the workforce out there about what TDM needs to do different, or maybe there's some things that you wonder why they happen the way they happen. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions.
I appreciate that, and I certainly appreciate your leadership. Your cooperative mindset is awesome, so that helped to make things work very well together. I have questions and comments, but I wanted to open up to my colleagues to ask some questions first before we get in there. Commissioner Baker?
Chief, thank you for being here. I know you thanked us for our response. I'd like to go on record and officially thank you, and going down to the SOC and just watching the number of challenges and opinions that were moving around in that room, and watching your leadership and sort of keeping your eyes on the goal was really impressive to watch. So I do thank you from an agency perspective, and I think from a state perspective, for your leadership through this event. One of the questions I have is, and I don't know, it may be more timely after Kelly's presentation, but on the lead up to the event, is there anything that we could do better from an agency perspective, and looking in, whether that be coordinating with maybe some of our petrochemical plants or with industry in general? Are there things that you would say, hey, that might be helpful, or something that we aren't thinking about? Because as you know, so as we got into it, some of there was there's some information out that wasn't exactly right, and we were having to spend a lot of time sort of responding to things that we really didn't need to respond to. And is there something that you could point out that maybe we could look at on the front end?
There's a lot of people that call it the great fuel shortage of Thursday. And it was an event. It really was. To think that we had another, and we try to plan and train for the incident within the incident, and we had a lot of incidents within the incident in this case. This business is a must-be-present-to-win event. And again, I go back to Michelle being in the SOC all the time and having somebody to reach out and touch this is what's going on, how can you help? And I know she's the one person there, and there are dozens or more back here and out in the field that are doing that work. But if we keep that model, we will always be successful. And I think the thing that I want to keep pushing for is smaller versions of that model at the regional level or at the district level. And as you're very familiar with, none of the state agency geographical boundaries line up with each other. We all have our own. And the thing that I ask you is, and I ask all the state agencies this, daily business, use your regular boundaries. But once the governor declares, can we try to figure out how to fall within the governor's planning districts, AKA the COGS, AKA the disaster districts, because they seem to be consistent. TxDOT tries real hard to do that. DSHS is working hard to do that. I think y'all do as good a job as anybody does. But it's really having the knowledgeable people there in the lead up of the event, because we try to open them before landfall as well, to make sure that we're reaching out. And nobody's going to know your business better than your employees. I certainly don't know it better than your employees. And so once we start hearing from the people that y'all are working with on a daily basis or that you regulate on a daily basis, that helps us share all of the state resources and all of the response to get us on the same page. And that's a long way to say, I can't think of anything I need you guys to do different on the front end other than to keep supporting the disaster district committee levels.
I don't have any questions, but Nim, I'd just like to say, this is my first hurricane, and it was so impressive to see the operations at SOC and the professionalism that your team and all the state agencies brought to this, and not just professionalism, but it was evident that this is a discipline unto itself, that it was drilled and practiced, and it almost had it was so calm, it almost had a routine feeling to it, and that was really comforting. The other thing that was really comforting that is kind of beyond any state employee is the way people across the state of Texas came out and helped their neighbors. And it occurred to me that is such a critical part of emergency response. I mean, we talk about emergency response beginning at the local level. Well, it begins at the neighbor to neighbor level, and that was not just impressive to see, but it was really sort of encouraging, kind of just as a human being, to see people reaching out to each other like that. So it was really a profound experience for me in that respect. I also want to say, just for TCEQ staff, it is such a privilege to get to come to work with y'all every day. I mean, it makes my job fun. I love what I do, and never has that been more evident than in the middle of the hurricane. So thank y'all. Thank you.
Yep. And Commissioner, I'll add, we're number one. Texas is number one. We have more major disasters than every other state in the nation. We're at the top of the list. And I think the general public has no idea that in order for each state to be eligible to receive a major disaster declaration from the president, it's based on that state's population times $1.46 per person. And it's on the last census. So today, our state threshold is $37 million of uninsured public loss. And that translates to all of our state agency costs that would go out the door, and all of the damage to local, city and county, and state infrastructure has to equal $37 million before Texas governor can ask the president for a major disaster declaration. Our state to the west, New Mexico, their threshold is $2.9 million. There are states in this nation that have the minimum threshold of $1 million before they're eligible for a major disaster. And even with the second highest threshold in the nation, second only to California, we have a double-digit lead over every state in the nation in the number of major disasters we've received since the first one in 1953. So we do this pretty good because we do it a lot. And to echo your points, we do try to train, we do try to plan, we do try to exercise together. We've done 2 statewide hurricane exercises, one Hurricane Charlie, which was earlier this year, and then one last year. The one last year was in the Brownsville area. The one this year was in the Houston-Galveston area. And a lot of the folks sitting in the SOC in the first 3 or 4 days of this event said the same thing you just said. This kind of feels like an exercise right now. And I think that's the mark of success, right? That means we do it enough that we're comfortable with it. We've reduced our stress and know what we have to do, and we can focus and operate much more efficiently that way. So thank you for pointing that out. And the other thing is, it was a lot of people's first hurricane. It probably won't be their last. And the thing that we need to keep reminding everybody is, if you've seen one hurricane response, you've seen one hurricane response, and the next one will probably be different. Just that's the nature of the business. So, but thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I'll try real hard not to be long-winded, but I do have a couple things I wanted to point out and then get your input into. First of all, the cooperation amongst our agency was great, and seeing that planning pay off is something that we take to heart. It's something that I've been very impressed with our agency since I've been here. You know, I often characterize it as that response when we show up, when Anthony Buck shows up at the first site, when we have our instant command center, mobile command center set there, is that's not the time to be making introductions between your staff and the other agencies that you're going to be cooperating with. And that's something that has been done very well and couldn't have been done better, I think, than the way it was this year. Day one in Corpus, not only setting up, but also actually out running, doing an analysis, doing the missions day one was a testament of that process working well. And so I thank you and our staff for cooperating with regard to that. A couple things that I want to say and then get your feedback on is, one of the things that struck me as we went across the state and visited with a number of the local leaders, especially the judges and mayors, is you've pointed out multiple times how the decisions are made at the local level. You know, the state does not act without the request and or the approval of the local entities involved. And I recall in some of those meetings, especially was evident when we were talking about the recovery as opposed to the response, when some of those officials were saying, when is the state going to tell us what we're going to do with regard to our recovery? And it was both seeing the deer in the headlights look that they got whenever the answer was, you're the one who makes that decision, but seeing that somewhat calm and that cooperative nature begin to take hold whenever you and others made it clear that, yes, you're going to be making those decisions, but the state is here to help support that. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that's something that going forward we need to find ways to put into our systematic approach as much as we can. I know that the Chancellor, the Rebuild Texas Commission is looking at some of those things, but I want to make sure, as we always do in our after-action reviews and are trying to apply lessons learned, that we don't miss some of that. And so I don't know if you have any immediate response to it now, but certainly that's something I think we need to cooperate on to make sure that we protect that as much as possible and help to educate those local officials about who to call, when to call, so that the process, it's kind of like whenever I'm thinking about my daughter who's fixing to drive, I did the same thing with my son. I want them to drive in a tractor on country property so that whenever they get on the road, they're not having to learn how to drive the machinery, they're having to make sure they're applying the rules of the road. We need the same thing to happen there, that when the emergency shows up, that's not when we start saying, who do I call because I've got debris on the curb and I can't get rid of it. So.
And Chairman, I wrote something down here that you triggered that I've never thought of before. Our division does senior official and public official workshops, and we're out there quite a bit doing those. Sometimes it's a little hard to get a mayor or a new county judge to come and sit through one of those. Sometimes it's very easy. But you know, I don't know that we share those meeting dates and locations with your regional directors. And if we're not, we absolutely need to start doing that. And so whenever I get back to the office today, that'll be a message that I put out, that every senior official, public official workshop, we at least make sure that not just TCEQ, but all of the state agencies in that district know that we're going to hold one and invite them to send staff to it. And I think that's one of the first steps of really showing that state. I can't believe we've never done that before. Guess we have to call this the Shaw rule or something like that. Nah, we'll figure something out. But that's brilliant. We need to do that.
Well, you know, and I think part of the value of the after-action review is it gives us an opportunity to take that breath and ask some of those kind of questions that during the heat of the response and or recovery, there's a number of fires, some literal and some figurative, that we're having to deal with. It makes it difficult to make those assessments. So one last thing before I turn it over to some other folks to maybe ask some questions. You talked to, and I agree 100% with wanting to be able to burn day one. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to have as quick a start on debris as we can in these kind of situations, because that becomes not only a huge time resource, it becomes a morale, it becomes the elected officials, the county officials, all of those can become bound up in that quagmire of debris, and a hopelessness can almost set in. And so I think it's really important that we evaluate how to move forward with that. Part of what we've done to try to make sure that that's happened, debris being a key focus of that, is the governor waiving certain environmental regulation and us applying those. And I think the metric we use is appropriate, and that is that we're looking at balancing the short-term benefit of waiving a rule regulation so that we can address an acute, immediate threat that is posed by debris in the houses, by debris on the curb, debris at the temporary sites. We want to make sure that we're being protective, not just that we're following a rule book and saying, no, you can't do it, here's Rule 127 that says you can't do that. And the reason I bring this up is there's some pushback, and I think there's going to be more pushback to question, why are you using a natural disaster to suspend the protections that we all want and need for our environment? And the further you get from the natural disaster, the less people remember the suffering, the less people remember those issues. And so both as we plan and as we go into a session before too long, those issues are likely to be there. And I want to make sure that we have done our homework and that we've reached out across agencies to where we can consistently communicate why that's important and why that's both a health and an environmental approach that makes sense.
And Chairman, I couldn't agree with you more. I think most people's memories are very short. And the further we get away from the event, the more that we get back to normal, which means all of our complaints and grievances and desires are they're all in our forefront again. One of the things that we always try to do in this event, and we will continue to do, is the Commissioner of Health. Dr. Hellerstedt has clearly put letters out that says, if we leave this here, there will be public health issues that we're dealing with. We had several of those local health officials as well write onto that same letter or write their own letters in pushing that. One of the things that I have pushed our team to do, and when I say our team, not only the TDM team, but Texas Forest Service and TxDOT, who is actually out doing as much burning of the vegetative debris as possible, is I want everything done before October 1st of 2018. I want all the vegetative debris gone. I want all of the bills paid. I want to go into this session and have all of the FEMA Category A debris and B emergency protective bills paid. And along that vein, thank you very much for the money to help hit that local match. That's a big deal to local officials that are cash strapped right now. So we're very much in partnership on that, and thank you for that. But I agree, we've got to, one of the things that we're doing, and this is a little off topic, but I'll bring it back around so you understand where I'm going with it. 2005 and 2009. 2005 when Katrina Rita hit. It was a 2007 legislative session that we still owed millions of dollars to bus contractors. There was no contingency fund at TDM or in the governor's office. It was GDM back then, or in the governor's office to pay those contracts. So we had bus vendors lining the halls of the Capitol complaining because they hadn't been paid yet. So the money is in the bank today to pay those bills. We've hired an outside audit firm to come and go through those bills. $58 million of those bills are in the process of being paid right now, less than 4 months after the event. So that kind of stuff is very helpful. And with the money that y'all have helped bring over to close out debris, we will be in a place that we can hold our heads up high next session when we walk in, that we saw debris, we saw 22 million cubic yards of debris, we worked together on it, and I'll take any advice for how to do it better next time, because I think we've done a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think the focus that not only we had, but you had and others had, recognizing early on that we needed to address that funding mechanism and making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed with regard to TDMS is a great example, making sure that all those approvals are in advance so that you don't have those issues. And so that focus, while sometimes it was problematic to be talking to local officials about the bureaucracy side of things when they're trying to figure out how to get debris off the curb, whenever we explain to them that critical component is you got to get this done right up front, or you're not only going to have all this debris you deal with, but you're going to look at a huge hit to your bank account, which you can't afford anyway. And so I think that combined effort was great, and so thank you for your leadership on that. I wanted to open up some questions. Executive Director Richard Hyde.
Sure. First of all, Commissioners, I would like to thank y'all. You know, usually when we get in these kind of situations, your ability to be involved is limited because of the rules that y'all are under. And I know all of y'all want to be involved because that's, you know, your spirit. But when we come into these kind of disasters, you know, you can be involved, and your efforts help Stephanie and I and everybody in this room so much, because there's so many things I can just ask y'all to do, and you just go do it and allow us to kind of do what you expect of us. So thanks. I really mean that. There was never a phone call that you took from me or Stephanie, or a trip into your office where we asked you to do something and you just said, yeah, sure, I'll take care of it. And it makes it, you know, it's a big help, I would say. Also, Chief, you and I have been through a lot. I was sitting here thinking, Ebola, which, you know, I still tell everybody, when you set your list of what you'll deal with as the executive director of the TCEQ, there's one at the top of that list that I wouldn't even know how to spell it. So Zika and little water crisis and now hurricanes. And, you know, there's one constant, y'all, and he's sitting over there. It's funny how when these things start, your phone rings and it's always Chief Kidd, and it's, what do you need from me, you know? And you've been a big supporter of the TCEQ for a long time. Me personally, you're a good friend, and I've always enjoyed your willingness to do whatever, and it's remarkable. And Kelly's definitely benefited from your leadership, and Michelle and others, but me personally, thank you, because no matter what it is, it's always comforting when I would look at the phone and it's them calling, because now I know I got somebody on my side that's going to help, you know, and so thanks. I really mean that.
You know, most people, whenever they look down and see my name, they go,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
again.
Not me. And yes, Kelly does own the right to have woken them up, and I, you know, I when Kelly called me, because I made Kelly call them, and he called me back and goes, man, I woke him up. I've never done that. I was like, Kelly, you're probably the only one alive that's ever done that. So anyhow, the only thing I want to mention on, and Chairman and Commissioners, y'all know this, we've been meeting with the environmental groups. We've had 2 meetings, and they've been really good, I think. The one thing that they've brought up with me that I think we should do a better job of, and I don't mean that there were other things, but the one thing is debris management. And I'm not going to speak for them, but I'm going to kind of mention to you what we were told is that some of these local debris sites are in communities or near communities that are of concern, and that community didn't know that they had a debris site, you know, in their neighborhood, right? And so I explained to them that what they wanted from the TCEQ was public involvement. And what I explained to them is, when it gets to our door, kind of like you, that's too late, because there's not a, hey, we'll get to this, you know, in the next few days. It's, can you get this done in the next few hours? And so I communicated to them that that's not where you need to be. Well, the next step of that is, where do we need to be? And I said, well, that's the local county mayor, county judge, working with them well in advance and where these locations are, and if you need to have public involvement, fine. Well, I was like, if you want to do that, the TCEQ is more than happy to go explain to people about debris management. So, you know, I committed to that, and I think it's fine. You know, we have our requirements and that kind of stuff, and the debris sites, and Kelly helped me, I think we're down to 70 now, right, maybe, of the 213? I don't remember.
It was about 74 last week, so that's probably pretty
Right.
close.
So, you know, just like Nim said, it's that local presence. I'm happy to go in advance if they want to do some kind of public involvement. It's up to the county or the city. They're going to, you know, I tried to explain to them, it's property they own, those kind of things, right? But, you know, there'd be some understanding of what's going to be there and then how long. it would take off or be gone. The other deal, Nim, that we're thinking about doing, and I would never do this without y'all's support, is there needs to be maybe some public service announcements about debris management. And what we found a lot of was, I would do the same thing. Homeowner throws everything in a black trash bag, sits it on the curb. Well, now you've just tagged that waste to go into a type 1 landfill, or you got to segregate it. And I don't think it's reasonable for us after the fact to force either county judges or local authorities. You got to segregate all that waste, right? It's not reasonable at all, and I would never support that. But we thought maybe some advanced information in that time period, not months before because nobody's going to watch it, but, of, hey, if you have debris here, if you want to effectively help get it out, here's what you need to do. And we have a flyer, which, I will brag on the environmentalists. They helped us pass the flyer out. They would go into neighborhoods and do it. But some PSAs on the front end about debris management, because Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the one constant of the TCEQ, right? What happens in the industry sectors, water systems, that all kind of varies, but there will always be debris. And if that's something y'all would be willing to work with us on, we've talked about, long term, we need to come up with something where we communicate directly with the public of how they handle debris. So anyways.
We're in.
Okay. And then, Nim, the other thing I'll tell you is if you want us and that was new to me, and I'm glad you mentioned it about the district alignments, whatever we need to do. Our regions, our lines get real blurry anytime they need to get blurry, right? So, Nim, if and Kelly, we may already do that, but if we don't do that, I'll commit to you, we don't have a problem with that at all. We can align with anybody, so.
And to the
Certainly
extent
do
that
better.
we don't do that, I know, for example, I had an issue that I called,
Right.
and I think I called Susan's office, and it was in the wrong region. And the call I got back was, you sent it to the wrong region, and we've already taken care of it and sent it to the right region, got the right people on the line. So,
Yeah.
y'all have done a great job. So thank you for our regional staff, regional directors that have done a great job of making sure that whenever folks like me don't do things the right way, they make the agency get the job done in a timely manner. So
would never say that.
That's key.
The other thing, Nim, that I'll commit to you is if you want us to participate in any kind of local discussions, I'll tell you, we'll hand it off to the appropriate regional director. I won't task the RD to actually go unless they want to go, but there'll be presence. If there's 100 of those meetings, we're happy to go to 100 of them, so.
What I hope that we'll start doing, and we'll coordinate as we go forward with this, but right after the first of the year, that we get out there and start pounding the pavement and start holding meetings like this before it gets too long. The other thing that I think we, the division, don't do a good enough job on is watching the election cycles. And there are 254 counties, 1,216 mayors. They are not all on the same turnover cycle. I mean, whether it's May or November or some in January and some leave in the middle. We're really trying to task our local folks to watch what's happening in their districts. But, we've got one guy that covers 26 counties up in the Panhandle, and it gets a little unwieldy sometimes, and maybe it's just that partnership of us making sure that we're all on the same page. We try to keep a master list of mayors' names, telephone numbers, and cell numbers if they give them, county judges, mayors, their office cell phone numbers if they give them, and then the emergency management coordinator. The funny thing is out of the 1,450 emergency management directors, the mayors and county judges that our law says, there's really only about 480 emergency management coordinators. Statewide, there's really only about 480 emergency management programs. Some of those are because multiple jurisdictions are working through one emergency management coordinator. And a lot of them, it's just that mayor, that judge is retaining the duties himself or herself and really have no idea the magnitude of what happens whenever they're the ones that declares a disaster. But if we can start sharing that information, we have it, we need to share it better with you, and we'll do that.
My job is supporting, Richard, and I sound like I'm being, insincere, but seriously, my job is not the really the heart of a disaster recovery. It's them. And speaking of Michelle, I think we had to try to pry her out of the State Operations Center because she wasn't ever leaving. But, I think that's a demonstration of the dedication and the passion that she has, that all the other people that are sitting here have, when it comes down to a really, really, really difficult situation, which is what Hurricane Harvey presented. So I'll be short because we've got lots more to recover, but that's the main point I'd make for now.
I do have one thing I do want to mention about Chief Kidd. When he came to become the chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management, he inherited a system that was a little bit of a military-style system and a little bit of ICS mixed in there, and in a very undersized SOC. And I remember one of the early on emergency management council meetings that Nim would lead, where he broached the idea to the council. I want to take the state of Texas into the full-on ICS structure, and I want to do it here at the SOC, and I want to have the tables, and I want to set it up. And the reaction through the room was, well, that's what we need to do, but we don't have room here to do this. And I remember he had that look of determination on his face, and I'm not sure if it was a couple of months later, the contracts were probably signed, the walls were coming down. I'm not sure if you expanded the State Operations Center, and this is 2 stories underground, walls that are about 2-3 feet thick that had to be cut through. It doubled, if not tripled, the size of the State Operations Center into a full-on, high-tech, currently updated operations center. And I fully believe the reason that Hurricane Harvey's response seemed just old hat, so to speak, was because of the training and the full-on ICS structure that you took us to. Had we been in the old ICS and the old structure, I don't think we would have had that success. And so that is a testament to your state leadership. So thank you.
Teamwork.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I hear
Richard.
teamwork a lot out of Chief Kidd, so, and it's something that we sign on to. And Kelly Cook, thank you for being a big part of that, your whole team. And Michelle, obviously, I have to compliment Michelle not only for all the time that she spent at the SOC, but also for having the commitment to let us pry her from the SOC on rare occasions so that she could keep going. And I think that's one of those lessons that it's hard to learn, because one, we need people that have that focus, dedication, enthusiasm, and commitment that we benefit from. But if we let them or they let themselves become burned out and unable to continue forward, that leaves a hole. And so thank you, Michelle, for one, creating a hole that we didn't want to have to try to fill behind you, and two, for doing such a good job of managing your time and managing resources. So other folks want to weigh in or have questions, because I know Chief Kidd definitely would be interested in hearing other insights, even those out in the audience. We have a podium right here. We can have questions or comments. If one comes, they'll all come. If none come, until somebody comes, it'll be. Other thoughts while we have Chief Kidd here? Well, again, you talked about the one of the reasons that we're so good at this is because we do it often enough, and at the same time, part of that, there's a lot of value in making sure that we capture the information, and I'll echo part of what you talked about is the turnover that we deal with out in the local officials, because a number of those folks that we visited with across the coast, up and down the coast, indicated this was their first hurricane, and obviously there's when there's not a hurricane sitting out in the Gulf, or sometimes even when there's a tropical storm and we don't think it's going to be a hurricane sitting out in the Gulf, there are 100 other things that are more critical, urgent, this is never going to happen to me, or I'll deal with it if it happens type thing. And that's going to be one of the big challenges that's coming along as we look at trying to provide that information to those folks. I think the timing is something that we really need to tap into expertise of our emergency respondent personnel and Chief Kidd and others, because I think if you do this 3 weeks before the hurricane, because you don't know it's coming, they're too busy. If you do it right as the hurricane's coming, that's too late because they're busy preparing for the onslaught. And then immediately after, that may be the right time in some cases, but they're challenged, they're buried. And even with regard to the public, you sort of have a window of opportunity that's there because right after the event, there's people who've evacuated that aren't back yet. So it's a real challenge for that communication. And if as I look back at the issues that we dealt with and are still dealing with, communication is one of the key challenges and needs that we have. Because, for example, we've had issues where, as there was discussion about burn ban being lifted and the governor waiving regulations, there were county judges and others who interpreted that to mean that they couldn't keep people from burning. And their fire crews were overtaxed. They were concerned about, if you're going to not let me tell people in my county that they can't burn, I'm concerned that my firefighting resources are going to be taxed beyond what they can bear. And so, we were able to communicate, no, your burn ban still trumps what we're doing. As soon as you have the resources and you're comfortable with the burning, you can allow it. We're going to be a partner with you, and we can help you identify ways to do that safe for the public as well as for the environment. So that communication all has to happen. And unfortunately, oftentimes the level of concern and or frustration has risen very high before they know who to pick up the phone and call. And if we had another hurricane make landfall right now, they would know who to call. But hopefully it's a while before that next hurricane makes landfall. And while it may be fresh on our memories because of the things that we did, the new judges, the new mayors, as well as some of the others, there'll be a lot of things that have happened in the meantime that weren't associated with response and recovery for a natural disaster. And so that's going to be a challenge and an opportunity, is to find a way to communicate that so that it's not so detailed that they put it away, but it's something that really points them to putting things into the system, because the system works well when it's applied. I know I wasn't going to talk long-winded, but I such a great opportunity to work with our staff, your staff, and the other agencies across the state. And so it was, while it's one of the dark times in our state's history, I think it's going to clearly be remembered as one of the great times of us pulling together and working as a team, because it could have been much, much worse, especially from the standpoint of loss of life associated with the hurricane. And I believe that a lot of what's happened in Texas after Hurricane Harvey is going to inform a lot of the way natural disasters are dealt with, not only in this state, but across this country. So thank you for your leadership in that, and thank you for your time here today. So, Chief, you can stay and watch. I'll give you a hand. Thank you so much.
I
So-
actually have some pictures of you.
All right,
Thank you, Chairman.
go Kelly.
It's my pleasure to be here today to talk about the Hurricane Harvey response review and discussion, to go through how our response to the hurricane, and look at how we did things and talk about how we can do things better. This is not definitely not a Kelly Cook discussion or an OCE discussion. This is agency. We have, I think, 16 different presenters with us today, representing the Office of Compliance Enforcement, Office of Water, Office of Waste, Office of Air. So without further ado, I'm going to give a quick overview of the hurricane to set the stage. And with that, we have a PowerPoint presentation that's going to run in the background. Some of the slides that we have. So Hurricane Harvey, as Chief Kidd had mentioned, developed in the Gulf of Mexico. And usually we don't expect hurricanes in the Gulf to really amount to much. When they come into the Gulf as a tropical storm or a wave and form there, especially early in the year, it's not very typical for them to generate into a strong hurricane. I broke the mold on that and became a Cat 4 hurricane. Making landfall, the tropical storm force winds at 7 a.m. On August 25th. Came ashore near Rockport, Texas. Stalled over Texas, which is not a good thing. And due to its slow motion over an entire week in onshore flow, caused catastrophic flooding in the state of Texas. Some of the high points from the storm, there was 12.5 feet of storm surge that was just northeast of Corpus Christi, located around the Aransas Wildlife Refuge. We broke a record in the United States for the highest amount of rainfall in Nederland, Texas. 122,000 people, more than 122,000 people, had to be rescued, many of those by helicopter. 5,234 pets were rescued. We had 270,000 homes that were impacted. 80,000 of those homes had at least 18 inches of water. What's significant about that is 18 inches of water goes above the electrical lines, the wall plugs, which is a significant damage factor when you have to gut a home and put in new electrical wiring. 23,000 of those had more than 5 feet of water. At the height of the storm and its impact, we had 61 public water systems and 40 wastewater treatment facilities that were inoperable. At the height, we had over 200 public water systems on a boil water notice. So this was a huge storm. The debris, as you heard, we're at the current estimate. This Harvey generated 22 million cubic yards of debris. That's a lot of debris. I'm going to talk a little bit about lessons learned applied forward, and then we'll hear from everybody about the response, preparedness and response, and then I'll talk about our lessons learned as we finish up. Some of the lessons learned that we applied forward come from just 2 years ago in 2015 when we had the May floods. We had a lot of the local government entities that had to deal with debris cleanup after this flooding. And a lot of those entities did not come to TCEQ to get their authorization for their temporary debris management sites. They're supposed to do this, but I think one of the reasons they may not have done that is because it was a slow-moving flood to where, as Chief Kidd had mentioned, to reach that $30 million threshold for the presidential disaster declaration, that wasn't declared, I think, until 2 months after the flooding. A lot of the local governments had already conducted their debris cleanup, and they were done and closed their sites. And then the presidential was declared. That was unexpected to some of those governments, and they had not come to us to get those authorizations ahead of time. They should have. That caused a big problem. Certainly, those that didn't, their reimbursement from FEMA was denied. And so a lot of effort from FEMA and TCEQ working with local governments to help resolve those issues and go out and look at those sites. We were able to help a lot of those facilities get their reimbursements in the end. But the lessons learned there was to get out and talk with those folks and make sure they get those pre-approvals. So over the last 2 years, Michelle and her staff teamed up with Chief Kidd's staff at TDM and FEMA, and they've gone on the road shows and workshops to help educate the public, the local governments on the need to do that. And I think where that paid off is out of the 214 approved debris sites, 1 or 2 didn't get pre-authorization. That's a record. So I think that really paid off. Lessons learned applied forward. Going back into all the way back to 2009, Hurricane Ike. One of the lessons learned after that storm was to form a group we call NDOW, Natural Disaster Operational Work Group, so that there's no duplication of effort on our piece of the work, which is the hazmat component, and that's actually branched out into water and wastewater and debris, to where a lot of the agencies do some of the same things. So we formed a work group, and now we pool our resources, work in a unified command, and really double, triple our resources. And so that was very successful. We've also added depth to our emergency response capabilities. During Hurricane Ike, we had one strike team with maybe 18 members. During Hurricane Ike, we had to open up 3 response locations in Beaumont, Houston, and in Galveston, and we also had a flood on the Pecos River. I would be talking with Chief Kidd on Saturday morning, walking through Home Depot about dropping sandbags from helicopters to plug holes in the dike. We didn't have enough disaster response capability, so we formed up the new concept, our DRS concept, which is our disaster response strike teams. We now have 16 of those teams in each region, and each of the team members are trained up in the NIMS ICS structure and all the disaster protocols that they need so that they can be interchangeable. They can go to any region or into any EOC and be interchangeable, and that really paid off during Harvey. So that was another lesson to learn. And I think we have around 130 members at this point, so definitely a major factor. And we also developed an agency hurricane plan and a debris management plan for the agency, and so that was a big step forward. The responsibilities, just to touch on the responsibilities, the TCEQ during a major hurricane like Harvey, the agency is responsible under the state's emergency management plan for conducting our hazardous materials and oil spill response. You know, we are the lead agency, and we work with the Railroad Commission and General Land Office for their duties as well, but we're the lead in that area. We also are support under, and that's Annex Q under the Emergency Management Plan. We're also the support under Annex K for Public Works and Engineering to help go out and look at the public works, public drinking water, wastewater facilities, and so on. Other duties that are assigned to us are to conduct rapid needs assessments of our regulated entities, processing fuel waivers, assessing dams, authorizing the temporary debris management sites, and so on. And so that's all laid out in the state's emergency management plan, the state's hurricane response plan, and that's something this agency takes very seriously, and I think we've done a good job. There's always room for improvement, and we'll talk about that today too. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the preparedness that was undertaken by the agency prior to landfall for Hurricane Harvey. So with that, I'm going to go to the TCEQ regional directors for our coastal regions. We're going to hear from the regional director from our Corpus Christi Region 14 office, our Region 12 Houston office, and our Region 10 Beaumont office. So without further ado, we're going to start with the regional director for Corpus Christi, Susan Cluis. Go ahead, Susan.
Good morning. So I'm going to cover a little bit about what we did to prepare our office and ensure that we would have some continuity of operations after the storm. As you heard from Chief Kidd, this thing, it happened really fast. It was a tropical depression Wednesday morning and became a Category 4 hurricane by Friday evening. So we had about 60 hours. It wasn't a lot of time. We, in the region office first, really started talking about this thing Monday afternoon, late, and said, management team got together and we said, you know, we really need to start getting ready for this because we don't know what it's going to do. So Tuesday, we started our preparations to prepare our office. And I think most everybody knows, and you've heard me say it for a while, we're on an island. I had my bubble up for a lot of years, you know, and they all headed my way and then turned, and evidently my bubble finally burst. But because we are on an island and we've got Corpus Christi Bay on one side and Oso Bay on the other, you know, there is a lot to do to get our offices prepared. So that Tuesday morning, or afternoon, we started getting all of our equipment together, our handheld monitoring equipment, our OGIC, our water monitoring equipment, air monitoring equipment. We gathered all of that up, and had a list, so that was ready for evacuation. We use an outboard to track our staff. There's a spot in there where you can have staff go in and have their emergency contact information and their evacuation plans. We asked staff to update that, ensure their AmeriAlert was current, so we could be in touch with them throughout the event. We used our ShareNet for the first time to upload our important documents onto the ShareNet so that everybody would have access to those, our hurricane plan, our vehicle tracking spreadsheet, those kinds of things. And then we made contacts with our staging areas to ensure that they would allow us to transport our vehicles and boats and store those. So we did, the other big piece was we went around and made sure Response Manager was functioning on everybody's computers. I'm fortunate enough, all my investigators are in laptops. And so we made sure everybody was ready to go. Wednesday morning, we came in, and at that point, it was a tropical storm, expected to be a Category 1 at landfall, but planned for a 2. And so we were ready to get rolling with our plans. By 1 o'clock that day, TAMUCC, which is where we're located, said, we're evacuating the campus and closing the campus down at noon tomorrow on Thursday. So that's the trigger for us. At that point, we began our office closures, which first started with a vehicle evacuation, the boats evacuation. We had one of our boats in a shop in Aransas Pass, and they managed to get it put back together for us, and we got it back, which is a good thing because that shop sustained major damage. But we worked to evacuate our vehicles. Given the short time frame, we used 2 locations in Corpus Christi, one being the Shriners, which is where we ultimately had our incident command, the unified command, and then TxDOT facility, high enough ground but not too far away so that we could get everything moved quickly. We started working on, getting files, covered our file system with plastic, transferring our phones to Lubbock, coordinated with San Antonio to have them come help man the DDC there in Corpus Christi. So we got all of that done on that Wednesday afternoon in anticipation of closing by noon the next day. By the next morning, the National Weather Service was forecasting a Category 4. So we, hurried to completions. Because we are on the first floor primarily, we typically move all of whatever's left behind that we don't evacuate up to the second floor conference room, and everything that's in our third floor suite comes down to the second floor conference room. Again, we're very lucky in that we have a lot of laptops, and so the investigators, all the staff were tasked with taking those with them. So we managed to get that done with IRD's assistance. They sent somebody down to help. All of our equipment was loaded in a trailer, our handheld monitoring equipment. That went to San Antonio so that it would be available for anybody to use. And we were able to secure the office and close everything down by noon. One of the things I wanted to point out as I end this is that we're from where we're located to Port Aransas, which is where the peak winds were. The peak winds were measured just a couple of miles east-northeast of Port Aransas at 132 miles an hour. As a crow flies, that's 18 miles from our office. And then the eye went over Rockport as a crow flies, approximately 28 miles. So a slight shift to the south, and our landscape could have been totally different, and our offices probably would have sustained major damage. I feel comfortable, though, that with the actions that we took in getting things out and moved to safer locations, that we would have been able to come back to another location, whether it be trailers or whatever, with our laptops, our equipment, our vehicles, our boats, and we could have been operational, again, rather quickly. And so it was a short, we haven't done this in a long time. We had a lot of practice over the years. But it's been 4 or 5 years since we've had any practice doing this in a real situation. And I think it was successful and, great staff. It went very well. So that was kind of what we went through, just to secure the office and ensure continuity of operations.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we're going to hear from Ashley Waddick. Ashley is the Regional Director for our Region 12 Houston office. Go ahead, Ashley.
Good morning. Well, we have a lot of the same preparation office to office, so thank you, Susan, for covering quite a bit of that. I'm going to spend a little time on perhaps what's unique about Houston and the prep we have to do. But I'm going to make a comment I made before, and I say it with love to Susan. This was supposed to be your hurricane.
No, it was.
It was supposed to be yours.
I like to share.
I know you do. And Kathy, you're probably going to make the same. Okay. So one thing that's immediately apparent for the Houston office is our size. So in terms of FTEs, we house about 215. So there's just a lot of coordination that has to occur internally, and I hope it appears seamless to everyone else, but to us it does not. In our office building, we are lucky in a sense that we're on the 3rd floor, so we don't have the same challenges as offices that are on the 1st floor. We do have some staff, Corey, I'm looking at you, Beth, I'm looking at you, that are on the 1st floor, and so we work with them, but the majority of our staff are on the 3rd floor. So our protections that we take are more if windows blew out, because if water in our office building gets to the 3rd floor, it's over. So our preparations are very similar in terms of phone transfers, protecting assets, but one of the things that was extremely concerning to me in terms of our assets is our vehicles. A regional office without vehicles, it's a shutdown. So we have over 60 vehicles. The last estimate I heard in terms of value is over $1 million. And Kelly Cook was informing me on a regular basis that we are talking about catastrophic, devastating floods, everything. So we have staging areas, and they're planned, but if all of Houston, in theory, is potentially going to be under several feet of water, we did not have a high level of confidence, and by we, I guess I should say me, in our staging areas. I mean, this was just uncharted territory. So we decided to get creative, and we really split them up. We sent some to Beaumont, and this is Friday the 25th, and we sort of knew which direction it was going to be going, but we did not know what we know right now. I might have just gone due north in retrospect. So we had 2 major staging areas in Houston proper, or I should say in the region proper. We sent a large number of cars to Silsbee. Thank you, Kathy. We had folks that live in high areas in Houston, and that's relative, that took cars home. So all of this requires carpooling and this and that. We're sending people on I-10 Friday, August 25th. I mean, the logistics of it were very intense, but it worked. We left some, I'm sorry, one more. We left some vehicles in our 2 parking lots at Region 12, and it worked. The challenge, and we'll talk about this when we get to response, was getting them back to do our work. But we are transitioning to having more of our staff with laptops. Again, it's a rollout issue. So our management team, which is about 30 folks, we have laptops for them. So we were preparing, making sure we had all of our communication protocols, making sure we were prepared for widespread power outages. And so, yes, you can have freestanding chargers, but usually they need to be plugged into something. And so there was a lot of that sort of prep. Who's got what? Who's taking what with them? That was very, it moved quickly, as Chief Kidd said, as Kelly said, as Susan said. We were prepared, but it came on us quickly. And prior to landfall, we were already in coordination, close coordination with the U.S. Coast Guard and working on embedding with their rapid needs assessment teams. And my folks were anxious, even with the storm coming in, anxious to get out there. Well, I'm high and dry. I think these roads are clear. We can go. We can do it. And you kind of have to, okay, let's make sure it's safe. And immediately after the storm, we were out and about for folks who could travel. So that was good. And then I want to emphasize the drills, the training, the prep. There's a reason that in my mind, my folks could shine. They've worked for it. They've prepared for it. They knew what they were doing. They could embed. By the time Bravo Branch could set up, we were ready to roll. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we're going to hear from Kathy Salcedo, our Regional Director for our Region 10 Beaumont office. Go ahead, Kathy.
Good morning. Our office, unlike a lot of places in the state, this is our third hurricane, and that's why I really no ill will, really wished it had stayed in Corpus. But actually, it was a tropical storm that hit us with a major flood thing when it actually hit us. And so we did a lot of the same things that Corpus and Houston did to prepare. So I thought what I would talk about is what we do every year to prepare for hurricane season, which is June 1st to November 1st. We have wonderful hurricane plans, continuity of operation plans, which we pull out every year, March-ish, April of every year, and start going through that and seeing, what do we need to update. We contact and update all of our memorandum of understandings with the city of Jasper, which is where we would move our offices if our offices were not able to be inhabited. It's about 2 hours north of our office. Silsbee School District, even though we didn't utilize it this time, we had it updated so that we could say, hey, we're going to be sending stuff from Houston. We've actually got a memorandum of understanding with our local electric provider that we're on the list of critical, bring us back up as soon as you can. Fortunately, we didn't need that this time. We didn't lose electricity throughout this. We did have pockets of people that lost electricity. So we go through all of that. In addition, because it is our third hurricane and debris management is not a foreign concept in our area, we have lists of locations in the various counties that we've used those debris management sites. And so we did some outreach prior to hurricane season saying, hey, county judge, or hey, emergency management coordinator, have you thought, and here are the locations you used in Rita, or here's the locations you used in Ike. It's a good place to start. And I think based on this, we're going to be a little more robust in that outreach come next year so that we can get some people pre-approved. Get out there and get the locations done and make sure that the population hasn't changed around and that type of thing. So we're going to be a little more robust next year. We also have everyone in our region is on a hurricane team, whether it be logistics, sampling equipment, cleaning your refrigerator out. If you've not cleaned your refrigerator out and you've lost electricity and you come back, it's not a pretty sight. So we clean out all of our refrigerators and dump it out. We have people on teams that file management, covering our files with tarps, and we start that April 1st. And we have a manager and a leader on each team, and they get together and do we have the right supplies? What do we need? Do we have the orange tape that we can mark container, the orange paint that we can mark the containers with. So we do preparation, and really close to June 1st, we will have a staff meeting hurricane party. And I've got some really creative folks in my office. I mean, they put in wind tunnels for you to have to go through, decorated up really wonderful. But it's to go over our plans, because with turnover, you know, you have a lot of people who have never worked in our office when hurricane season hits. So we also invite our locals, our Coast Guard, we had a presentation from our Lake Charles weather person to talk about what they do and when they do that, so that we can familiarize ourselves and have those local people with us, faces and names. So we do that every hurricane season. Also, we, throughout the year, which is very important, are the drills, working with our DDC, having a good face-to-face knowledge of who our people are. I'm fortunate that my management staff, for the most part, has rode those 3 storms out with us. And Sarah, I've got Sarah Kirksey here, who's my emergency response manager, and is amazing at this kind of stuff. It's right up her wheelhouse. She likes this kind of stuff. But she has group texts with our local officials so that it's easy, you know, how's it going, what do we need? And so I think that's a critical part of being prepared to respond when it happens. So it's not like, who do I call? And say, it's this text number, this is what we're doing. So, and that's what we do throughout the year to prepare for floods and hurricanes.
Thank you, Kathy. And all of this is so important because we have to not only ensure our continuity of operations, we have to be available to respond as quickly as possible to the regulated community, to the public, to do those duties that were assigned into the emergency management plan. And so to do that, we have to ensure that we take these steps to make sure we have fuel available, make sure we have the vehicles available, and the monitoring equipment and the staff. And so that's why all that's so important. Thank you. Next, Anthony Buck with the Critical Infrastructure Division. He's our emergency management coordinator, and he's going to talk to us about disaster preparedness training and exercises.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me now? Okay, good morning, everyone. Since our inception of the emergency management program back in 2012, we went on a really aggressive training schedule to try to get training out to the regions to stand up the disaster response strike team concept. And we've been pretty busy. We generally try to do at least 4 major exercises in each of the areas a year. And we also get a lot of requests for training and stuff like that. 2017 was a very busy year for us. It seems like the calls kept coming in, and you know, we had a lot of enthusiasm. It's almost like somebody had a premonition or something. But I'll talk about that. In 2017, we had over 4 response manager training exercises. And for those that don't know, Response Manager is a data program that we use to track our data and things in the field. And it's really important with our response. So make sure that everybody knows how to use it beforehand. So we try to get as many folks in the agency and other agencies, our NDOW, Natural Disaster Operational Work Group partners, trained up so that everybody's on the same page when we get there. So we had 4 major training exercises, over 20 hazardous materials and emergency management training classes of different places all over the 16 regions, and then 7 smaller disaster exercises. That could be anywhere from a 1-day little response manager tune-up training to a full-blown. But one thing that we did in 2017 that we really want to sustain going forward is we had a full-scale hurricane exercise in the Lake Texoma area. Now, a lot of folks said, Lake Texoma, why are you doing a hurricane exercise up there? Well, a lot of it is we actually invited partners from different states, because EPA, who kind of heads up the NDOW and pays for a lot of it, they have to invite other states to kind of bring in. So they brought in Oklahoma and as well as Louisiana. But really successful exercise. We brought in individuals from a number of our regions, Tyler, Houston, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, and it was really a dress rehearsal for Hurricane Harvey. We also had some folks from the Texas DPS Communications, and but the Stress Communications, one entity we did not inform about our exercise that had over 170 players coming in was the Division of Emergency Management. And you should have heard the district coordinator surprise when he found out that, you know, all 170 of us were showing up with multiple vehicles and 4 command posts and everything like that. But we've since fixed that, so shouldn't have that going forward. So, but that's kind of what we did to kind of prepare for the hurricanes. We try to do it every year, and it was, I think it really worked out.
Thank you, Anthony.
Can I ask
Yes,
Kelly,
sir.
and I don't know if it's for Anthony or Kelly, but just out of, could one of you guys just maybe hit on real quickly that relationship with the EPA through the NDOW process and how that worked through this response?
Okay, NDOW was formed after Hurricane Ike. We all kind of got together afterwards, and some of my predecessors, and then myself when I joined the agency. And we meet quarterly. And a number of agencies are involved: Texas Parks and Wildlife, EPA, the U.S. Coast Guard, General Land Office. And for this response, it was huge, because when Commissioner Shaw brought on talking about forming up Unified Command, and it was really great to see him that first day. It was awesome. But because we all knew each other, we had trained for this, we had prepared for this, we've done numerous drills. The NDOW, EPA pays for NDOW drills. When I say a lot of these drills were regional exercises, they were actually paid for by the EPA, and they set up a lot of it. So it kind of really helps us out. But we all knew each other. All of the major incident command folks knew. 3 out of 4 of us, there were 4 folks in the incident command for ESF-10. Only one, the Coast Guard Commander Hutley, we were friends. We didn't know him beforehand, but all the rest of us were friends. We've responded to numerous things together and exercised together. You know, I know the names of their children, and likewise. And it was a wonderful thing. And Commander Hutley made that comment the very first day when he showed up, and he was named the Coast Guard Federal Armed Scene Coordinator Representative. He's like, this is going to make my job so easy because everybody is friends here at the table. And it really, really helped out.
Thank you. And Commissioner, one of the reasons that it was so important to form NDOW was during Hurricane Ike. We found that TCQ, EPA, GLO, Railroad Commission, even the Coast Guard, we were duplicating work. EPA, they were helping us, but they would go out and they would identify a hazardous material container and maybe mark it, and then another agency would go do the same thing, or we would drive by one that needed to be picked up by another agency that we didn't know about. Reporting out the information statewide from all the different entities working in the ESF 10 was very difficult, a lot of hours trying to gather all that information. So after part of our lessons learned was, let's form a work group where we all work together. And we have one database where all the data goes into that same database from everybody. And everybody gets a say in the operation plans and the protocols and the forms we use. And so that's how it was formed. My only part in creating NDOW was when my folks came to me and said, can we do this? Can we be part of this? I said yes, and I got out of their way. And the staff created that, and they did a fabulous job. It's also a work in progress, and it'll be part of our lessons learned, but that's how it came about. Thank you. Next, we're going to talk about the hurricane response activities. And to kick that off, I'm going to talk very briefly about the coordination between TCQ and EPA. And Anthony had already talked about NDOW. and how early on we formed up with EPA under NDOW, under unified command. And at one point, we had upwards of 500 people from our agency and probably 200 or 300 people from EPA as part of this response. And we all formed up under NDOW and under a unified command, opening branch offices in Corpus Christi, in Houston, and in Beaumont. And in fact, the location that we staged in Corpus Christi is the very same location we trained at before, where we've had exercises with the same people. We did the same thing and went to the same target. So that's how it got to be Old Hat, because we had done it before and we'd been there before. And I think that was a major part. Another thing that we've established, probably this is back before Ike, is that kind of an agreement between Ronnie Crossland with EPA, my counterpart, and myself. If it's a Category 1, 2, or 3 Texas, we probably got it. We will include you, come down, and we'll make sure you're part of what we're doing, but we probably don't need that much help. Cat 4 or 5, we need help. And so we demonstrated that with Ike, and then again with Harvey. What we did with Ike is at my reluctance, I allowed Ronnie Crossland to come down and spend a week with me during Ike, just to see how we do things and to help. And when he left, I was, I didn't know what to, it was so helpful to have him embedded with us during Ike. I learned so much, and it helped the overall state response and agency response. During Hurricane Harvey, we did that again. Actually, Ronnie was on a temporary duty assignment in Washington, D.C., and they pulled him, sent him home, and assigned him to TCEQ for 2 weeks. And he sat in front of me at my table for 2 weeks straight, and it really worked well. There's so much chaos in a disaster, and there's so much misinformation. It really is problem solving all day long. And to have the person that can get the problem solved directly with EPA sitting in the same room with me was so beneficial. And that's a model I think that we'll definitely do over and over and over again. So very helpful. We had EPA embedded down at the State Operations Center. That worked well. We had EPA successfully helped us request and obtain fuel waivers. I've never seen fuel waivers go through that fast, ever, never. They've done a great job there and work really well with us. We had the EPA liaisons come in. They distributed TCEQ social media messaging to 54 EOCs across the state. They also joined us and participated in 261 joint site visits, the wastewater, drinking water facilities, debris management sites, and so on. So not only working with the field staff at EPA headquarters, we had Administrator Pruitt, we had the acting regional administrator here working directly with Richard and Stephanie, if not every day, every other day throughout the event. So from the top down, we had their full cooperation, and it was very, very helpful. So with that, next I'm going to talk about the involvement with the State Operations Center during our response activities. And for that discussion, we're going to hear from Michelle Helveka, which is with the Critical Infrastructure Division, and she's the agency's Homeland Security Coordinator.
Good morning. Well, for the record, I did go home and sleep at night. I did not sleep under the desk at the SOC, and so, but before I get started, I do want to have an opportunity to tell Chief Kidd, thank you for your leadership and the kind words. Some of the little insights that I know a lot of people don't see in here is a lot of times before our statewide conference calls, like I said, he'll come in, give us a lot of times it's like, oh, it's so quiet in here and so serious in here. But as far as the leadership skills, I mean, I can't talk enough about that, because even during this event, I mean, when we were getting the weather reports, Chief Kidd is there telling us, okay, it's supposed to be a Cat 2, let's prepare for a Cat 3. Cat 3, let's prepare. Now, Kelly didn't like the calls every time I called him after our meeting. He's like, okay, have you heard the latest? But even on the rainfall events and the flooding events, I mean, when we were getting the 10 inches, let's prepare for 20, let's prepare for 30. And that's honestly helped us in the end, because we were prepared to the best of our abilities with what resources we had. And like I said, I've been through several events. Like I said, this was obviously our largest one. Yes, I've worked other hurricanes, but that was in the field, so a very different role in this. But as far as the State Operations Center, obviously y'all all know that I represent TCEQ there very proudly, and a lot of the information that I get, I can't do without the support from everyone here in this room, our field staff, because I am at the end of the day an information pusher, and I take information, whether that's coming from Chief Kidd, our other state agencies, our federal agencies, our local jurisdictions, and making sure that those answers, if I don't have, I can get those rapidly and get that information to who needs that. And I couldn't do that with the support here, the support of Chief Kidd, his staff, and all our other state and federal agencies. One other thing during this event, like I said, was obviously dealing with a lot of the water, wastewater issues, debris operations. One thing that I personally wasn't expecting was issues with chemicals not being able to get to locations. We were fortunate enough to bring others, associations, to provide some of that. And so a very different role of what we were expecting. I also got to serve as infrastructure branch director, had served as deputy for a few years, and was kind of hoping for like a small tropical storm to cut my teeth on branch director duties. But like I said, it worked smoothly. And just to let you know, as far as the infrastructure branch at the State Operations Center, that includes TxDOT, Railroad Commission, General Land Office, DIR, PUC, Texoga Food and Fuel Group. We also had staff from the U.S. Coast Guard and Army Corps of Engineers as part of our infrastructure branch. And having those relations built even away from that really helped as well, because we knew kind of what each other's roles are and responsibilities, and making sure when I was getting phone calls that were non-TCEQ related, kind of know who to go to, what to ask, and in some cases also jumping across the tables into some of the other branches to ensure that that information, just because it did not involve us as far as TCEQ, is to ensure that also that if it was something that needed to be handled by Texas Military Department, that was conveyed to them in a timely fashion to make sure that that work got done. And also, I wanted to briefly also talk about was just our daily conference calls. We have daily statewide conference calls that many of you are aware of. And this is basically to get the information out on a local, state, federal agencies, to make sure everybody's up to speed on things. There's times there's TCEQ related things that I didn't know about, and like I said, it's a great resource to have those. One thing I do want to say is also some of our other recovery calls that we have are very beneficial. I know we've started that on even some of the flood events to give an opportunity for the local jurisdictions to ask those questions that may not get asked during the statewide call. And this is kind of one of those, gives them an opportunity to ask truly the down and dirty questions of what do we do, and that's been beneficial. And I don't know who came up with that, but that's been a wonderful opportunity for the local jurisdictions to get the information that needed as well. And then as far as some of the briefings with the governor, I know some of y'all were involved on that, and I appreciate the support on that. And ensuring that he got the information he needed a lot of times for the questions he was being asked, as well as the governor's office. One other item I wanted to also talk about was the transition from the state operation to the joint field office. As many of us just moved from down at the DPS campus to down the street here. And like I said, a lot of state agencies still were participating in that, going from the truly response side of the house over to the recovery mitigation side. And like I said, and that transition's been very well. And then the other thing at the end of the day is just overall, I believe that I agree with Chief Kidd that this event went very well as far as just the response, and even now on the recovery side, because of the relations we have on the local, state, and federal. And even away from this, and even after that, because it kind of when everyone starts going back to their daily jobs, it's good because we still have those relations that we can call and get those information. I know I'm still getting a lot of questions as far as debris operations. Like I said, and knowing that I can still call up TxDOT if there's questions specifically to some of their sites to get that information. And but like I said, I definitely wanted to give Chief Kidd kudos, and as well as everybody here at the table. And like I said, and can't say enough about our region offices. Thank you very much, because at the end of the day, I can't do my job down there without all of y'all's support. So, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we're going to hear briefly again from Anthony Buck, our Emergency Management Coordinator, about how we established and operated under our unified command during the response. Go ahead, Anthony.
Kind of already touched on a lot of this, where how we all, Indow partners and also our local regions, we formed a unified command. It got evident pretty quickly that we were going to have to form branches just as we did during Ike. So we decided that we were going to have an area command, and it kind of went pretty early. In the beginning, we decided we were just going to stand it up in Corpus Christi and possibly move it somewhere closer to a more central location. But we later decided to just keep it right in Corpus Christi because it would have just been cost prohibitive to move it. But it formed up very quickly. Unified Command worked very well in all three of the branches. I heard nothing but good things from all of our agency partners about how things went smoothly. I mean, there were hiccups, of course, but because we had such a good working relationship with all of our agency partners, we were able to solve things rather almost scarily fast. I mean, it seemed to go into it. I've had a running joke with some folks about, if you're going to come see a unified command post, please don't show up on the first day. Well, what happened? We have on the very first day I get a call from Kelly. He's like, hey, guess what? EPA Administrator Pruitt's coming, and guess who's coming right behind him? Chairman Chaw. All right, yeah. But luckily, because we had drilled and trained and had that process in place, it was kind of smooth and seamless, and it worked out pretty good. And going forward, I think that's how we're going to go in the future.
Thank you, Anthony. Before we go back to our regional directors to hear about response activities, one of the important aspects of any major response like this is funding. And one of the things that we always try to do is when there's going to be a presidential declaration, or there has been one issued, like the case with Hurricane Harvey, is to get in and make a request to FEMA for a mission assignment. And what a mission assignment does is it is basically funding provided by FEMA to TCEQ or any state agency that asks and is approved for services from another state or federal agency. So in other words, we ask for EPA's assistance. And we, through several mission assignments that we submitted, we ultimately were approved for $15 million worth of EPA assistance. That's their contractor assistance for collecting and disposing of hazmat, their staff time, participation, travel, and so on. And we did that early, and we're able to take advantage of that. There is a cost share that's associated with that, usually the same as the other reimbursement rates. But what a lot of people don't realize is the first few weeks or so, that mission assignment is usually 100%. And so if you can get in early and take advantage of that 100% period, it's very advantageous to do that. And so we were able to do that, and I think it paid off big. One of the reasons we were able to do that was our partnership with EPA. We were there to guide us through the process and to help us get those through. Our partnership with TDM, they have to approve and sign off on everything, and they did, and it was very helpful, and we thank them for that. So $15 million is a lot of money, and it really helped us with our response, and I think is one of the reasons we were so successful. So with that, now I'm going to go back to the regional directors one more time to hear about some brief comments on the response activities. Again, we're going to start with Susan Cluis, our regional director for TCEQ Region 14, Corpus Christi. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, so the first thing we had to do, I mean, after the storm passed through on Saturday, our first mission was to make sure our staff were okay. And we did have one person that was unaccounted for a little while, and have a great group of people, and they figured it out with a series of text messages and whatnot. Somebody went and found her and made sure she was okay. So that was our first mission. Our first debris site was received on that Sunday, and I shout out to Kendra Houston and Dallas for helping us manage those debris applications as they immediately started coming in. I also had a staff member who had a state vehicle and was out in the field going to look at the ones he could get to. So we started that on Sunday. Part of bringing our offices back up, we're waiting for the university to clear the buildings and make sure that they were safe, and power. Much of Corpus Christi was without power for an extended period of time. So we weren't able, we assessed the offices on the Monday following the storm. By Tuesday, we had the clearance to start reassembling our offices and bringing vehicles back. So we had a core group of staff that came in on that Tuesday and helped us bring back up. Most of my staff evacuated. Almost everybody from the region office evacuated, except for me and 2 or 3 others. So it was an interesting night. We only had a few people that had made it back in. A lot of folks were still without power. And so we just brought in whoever could and helped bring the office back up. So we were able to reopen the office by Wednesday at 8 a.m. At that point, we embedded with the Unified Command was set up, and so we embedded our staff with Anthony's group over there, and it was like the cavalry came when they showed up. It was a relief. And from the Unified Command, we started doing orphan containers and then the water investigations. The priority was to start to get the wastewater back up. And so we started with community water systems. We partnered with Carrie Michelle's group, and they were making phone calls. We were doing some follow-ups, and we did follow-ups in the field, starting with community water systems, domestic wastewater treatment plants, and then followed up by non-community and industrial wastewater plants. We went to the ones that we needed to. One of the things we discovered is that maybe the information we got from some of the operators wasn't always exactly accurate. So we did at one point start ground truthing with residents in the area. Do you really have water? Those kinds of things. And so that was an interesting concept for some of the smaller communities and smaller water systems. So we did do some of that. And then we did have a major surface water plant that we, with Carrie Michelle's group, provided some on-site technical assistance to help get them back up and going. We did conduct air surveillance runs in the Corpus Christi area, Victoria, Calhoun County, and San Patricio counties. We were very fortunate from the air standpoint. We really didn't have any releases. All of our facilities did the right thing. They took themselves down in a controlled manner and brought it back up in a controlled manner, which was different from what we've seen in the past. And so that was really, we were really lucky in that respect. We just didn't have industrial problems. And then debris. And, debris, I could talk for days about debris. At the peak, we hit around 85 approved debris management sites. We're currently down around 30, so it's looking a lot better. But we've had some really huge piles out there. A lot of, not only brush, but a lot of C&D, just because we did have the actual winds and the hurricane. So you've got whole homes destroyed, and you've got a lot of brush from Aransas County in particular. One of the things that we did, we are continuing to do, is we have a lot of mulch piles. A lot of them are mulching. And one of the concerns being, I don't want another Helotes. I don't want to be that regional director. So we already had one large thermometer, but we purchased 4 more, I believe, that are 5 feet long. And we started going out and measuring temperatures in the piles. And in fact, had one in Aransas County that was just about to go. When we measured it, it was, I think, right around 160 or maybe 165. And the temperatures for combustion is typically around 168 to 176. We were able to contact them, and they got out there immediately, turned the pile, and broke it up. But we are continuing to monitor mulch piles to ensure that we don't have any fires. And I think that's, mulch and debris, we're going to be doing it for a while longer. But that's kind of our biggie.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we have Ashley Waddock, our Regional Director for TCEQ Region 12, Houston. Go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you, Kelly. So for Houston, the office building was fine. I actually managed to get there during our storm days, but the city was effectively shut down. So that made it interesting. We, of course, were also ensuring that we were in touch with all of our staff and trying to determine impacts and how severe, and if we could help, if help was needed. We were very lucky that our numbers were very low, but we did have impacted staff. While the office was closed, which was from noon August 25th, and we reopened 8 a.m. September 1st, which was the following Friday, we were working around the clock. So it was like running a virtual office, if you will. We had staff, prior to Bravo branch being set up, we had staff fully embedded with the Coast Guard and the Rapid Needs Assessment teams. So as I mentioned in the remarks a few moments ago, all of our vehicles were hither and yon. And so that was a challenge. And of course, the ones we left behind at the office were the ones that, like the older ones, we weren't going to drive the ones to Beaumont that are our, Anyway, so we had vehicle issues, we had staff availability issues, even if they were fine. So this was a lot of logistics being done remotely. I think the coordination internally, again, I hope it was seamless to y'all, but it was pretty intense during that time. While the office was closed, it was also interesting, as part of our Harvey response in Houston, we had a very significant emergency response incident, and it was also around the clock. And it also required a great deal of coordination internally within the TCEQ, as well as with appropriate external parties. And it was almost like a parallel universe, because the region is really focusing on Harvey, and yet we've got this other matter going on. And similarly, while all of that was going on, there were major significant emission events, and obviously I'm just going to leave it right there. But so we were working on so many fronts all at once that, bluntly, in trying to think about preparing for today, I had to really focus. It was sort of a blur. Anyway, as Susan mentioned, I think this is probably true for all of us, we are still in Harvey response mode. I know it's been months now, But I have assets that are 100% dedicated right now, human resources, physical assets dedicated to Harvey response, in particular, of course, debris and waste, my waste folks. So, Kelly, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we have Kathy Sacedo, our Regional Director for our Region 10 Beaumont office. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone in this room and this agency for making this response as painless as it could be for me. This was I said I've been through 3 hurricanes, but it's my first RD hurricane. I always said I'd retire before that happened, but since it was a tropical storm, I guess I'm still here. But it was, my prior RD used to always say it takes a village, and it does. It takes a village of very dedicated, knowledgeable individuals to make something like this work as well as it has, from the top down. I never felt pressured or silly for decisions I made, so I want to thank each and every one of you for that in this room. I'd forget people if I started naming names. We had a major flood event, and as I said, 3 hurricanes. One was storm surge, one was wind, and now this is flood. I happen to be fortunate enough to live in the city that now holds the record for the amount of rain that fell in 5 days. And one thing I want to point out is that Susan got hit and opened her office up the day that we actually got hit and started flooding. So it was a long, protractive event for the state of Texas. So we were cut off from all major roads. So if we had people evacuate, they could not get back in for several days, probably a week, 10 days. The photo that you saw with the white caps on I-10, I really thought that was Photoshop, but it wasn't. That was actually I-10 from Beaumont to Winnie. Chief Kidd mentioned blowing up part of I-10. That was in my region as well, so that that was going towards Louisiana on Vidor, so that we could get some relief from the water on our major thoroughfares. If we had evacuated our vehicles to the Silsbee High School, we wouldn't have been able to go get them. So we had plenty of gasoline in our area, just couldn't bring anybody in or out. So that was unique for us. I said earlier that I've got some really dedicated, trained managers and staff that have been through this, so they just knew what to do immediately. There was no questions. We worked 7 days a week on contact with phones, on all the calls that we had, even before we could open our office up at September 1st. And I forgot to mention in our preparation, in our region, we require all of our investigators to go through the ICS training to at least become basic emergency response in their PDP. So they were familiar with the structure. So it was pretty seamless to be able to integrate into our DDC. It took us a few days to integrate in because they asked us not to come until they finished the search and rescue operations. A lot of the photos that you see there, we had an entire community where the water was to the roof line, every home. I mean, lots of folks are not even going back there. I had staff members who still are not in their homes, that they had 4.5 to 5 feet of water inside their homes, have lost everything. And it's a very slow process. And again, I want to thank the support for giving them time to be able to recover. But we immediately went in and we set up our war room and our conference rooms and had all our managers there and people entering into response manager, and immediately started contacting all of our water systems because we knew that would be priority. And we ended up contacting 395 public drinking water systems and 204 wastewater systems in that first week or so that we were there, and trying to get things into response manager. And I understand we're going to work on making that a little better next time. We also started to set up the incident command because of our contacts. We knew where we wanted to go, and we took over some of the logistics of that. We had people already setting up teams the first day we came back. So we were able to get out there with boats when it was safe. A lot of times when we're getting, what is it, armchair quarterback? Why weren't you out there? Well, it just wasn't safe. So we made sure that it was safe, because priority is our staff safety. So we did boat teams, we recovered containers, we worked, I've got numbers here, 62 different spills and discharges. We're fortunate, as most folks, that our industry saw what was coming, and they did some orderly shutdowns. So we didn't have any huge issues with emission events or things. We had a few, but nothing huge, because they knew what to do, and then they've, for the most part, had pretty orderly startups. Our issue is, well, we've got still working with some of the public drinking water systems, Rose City. I'm sure y'all keep seeing that. And I want to thank Carrie Michelle's staff for sending their experts, the TOPS team, down to work with them. And they worked with several of their other wastewater treatment plants and our drinking water plants. But the issue was, when you flood to the roof of your building, your electronics get fried. Your chemicals, you can't get them in, can't get them out, don't know what to do. So we worked very closely with those county judges and those operators to try to, what we could do to help them get back up and operating. In the middle of that, which is really interesting, City of Beaumont, which is one of our bigger cities in my region and where our office is located, went without water for several days, was 7 days, something like that, 10 days. They have 2 sources of water in 2 different counties, and they both flooded. And when I saw what happened, I mean, it was local industry who helped bring in pumps and the solutions, and Office of Water, and everybody working with them to even just get us some kind of potable water back in the city of Beaumont. And we had to get porta pots sent to our office, thank you very much, so that we could actually stand up and have our office. And we do have debris management sites. We don't have near the amount that Susan has, but we are working still with those. We still have some of those open, and as Ashley said, we are still in hurricane response. We're trying very hard to get us back to business as usual, but we'll be dealing with this for still quite a while.
Thank you, Kathy. Next, we're going to move through briefly through the other activities, and then we'll touch on our lessons learned. Before we start there, though, I would like to recognize TCEQ's Office of Administrative Services. No response can ever happen without technology. And John, your staff were with us every step of the way, and they were phenomenal, and we really appreciate the assistance, so thank you there. Next, we're going to hear about our public water supply assessments and assistance. And to start that off, we're going to hear from our director from our water supply division, Carrie Michelle Lacow.
First, thank you for moving. I was really beginning to panic. I was going to need a booster step coming up to the podium. I'm here, and I'm Carrie Michelle Lacow. I'm the Director of Water Supply in the Office of Water, and I'm really here to talk about some of the support activities that we did, and really that's our role in the Water Supply Division, is to support the regional offices, particularly at the time as they're gearing up to get ready for the storm and dealing with the emergency conditions. We're ramping up and start talking with our public water system, so we're kind of the first introduction with the regulated communities, are gearing them up for the storm. You know, our division started perking up that Wednesday when we started hearing about the impending flooding conditions. And so one of the first things that we do in our division is prepare maps. And that was very critical, because we started putting in GPS coordinates of every public water system, particularly those that were susceptible to flooding, making sure that they had updated contact information, and then getting those out to the regional offices, but also making them available for first responders to use to find those plants to get out on site very quickly. The other thing that we started doing was making phone calls to our groundwater and surface water systems down along the south coastal regions. And of course, at the time that we were doing outreach, we were only looking at a small segment based on where we thought landfall was going to make it. And so we started talking to them primarily to look at what their readiness was like, and that was making sure chemicals were moved and stored accordingly so that we didn't have any hazardous chemicals and that there were going to be safety issues. Making sure power equipment and their pumps and motors and everything else were well protected. We talked a lot about their chemical treatment inventory, making sure they had enough fuel needs and those sorts of things. We also put out an email to public water systems and operators to give them the information in a handy format so that they could have that for a quick reference guide. A lot of that was about for boil water notice requirements in the event that they had to issue those. Particularly, we put a template together so that they could use those and get that efficiently disseminated very quickly if they had to do that. We also gave them a lot of information in terms of technical assistance needs and contacts that they could call right off the bat. And then as well as other organizations that could also provide assistance to them for preparedness and response as well, most notably TexWarn. And our relationship with TexWarn is really key, especially from the mutual aid agreement that we have with them, that they work with utilities. And we've talked about communities helping communities, and TexWarn is instrumental about getting those utilities together to help one another out. So that's a very good relationship that we have with them. One of the big things that we really were concerned about were the fact that we had a lot of chemical treatment manufacturers located in the Houston area. For the majority of supplies, chemical supplies for treatment around the state, they're kind of concentrated in that area. So we were really kind of concerned that if those manufacturers went down, not only for the systems within that area, but for the systems around the state not having enough inventory. So we did a lot of outreach for manufacturers across the United States, talking to them, making sure that they had enough inventory for Texas in the event that Texas needed the supplies after the storm, that those would be readily available and could be shipped in. We did the same for the testing equipment. In the event that testing equipment was down, other portable equipment was damaged in the storm, we wanted to make sure that that was made available to Texas systems so that we could start getting water quality data right away and getting those tests for public health protection. We put a lot of regulatory guidance out on our webpage, particularly more boil water notice information. We put a lot of information for emergency water haulers and getting that temporary guidance put together so that once people had to start hauling water, that information was available. We also worked very closely with the Environmental Assistance Division to formulate an online reporting tool so that we could get information from systems coming in the event of outages, boil water notices, whatever the case would be. They had that mechanism to get that directly to us right away. We started making our calls that Sunday. We came in. We worked very closely with the wastewater folks to start calling and doing outreach to our public water systems. The following day, we also had personnel from EPA Region 6. We had about 11 staff come down over the 10-day period that we all worked making phone calls. We probably contacted 2,500 systems. And our main goal was just trying to get their operational needs and technical assistance needs, get that routed over to Kelly's group so that that could be disseminated for a very rapid multi-agency response. The other thing that was quite concerning to us were labs. There's a lot of labs concentrated in that area. The majority of public water systems go to the nearest lab to get their analysis done. So we started contacting labs to make sure that they were up and running. We also called other labs around the state so that in the event that those labs were shut down, they could take the extra capacity for water analysis samples. We put that information on our website so that everybody understood what the labs were that could take the extra capacity. Another important thing was we partnered with our drinking water experts down at UT, and they helped us answer a lot of questions that we were getting from businesses. For those systems that had water outages, businesses still wanted to be up and running. Other types of non-public water systems were having issues in terms of hauling water in, wanting to store water. So the folks down at UT really helped us work with those individuals to give them safety and keep protection of public health at that level and what they needed to do. Talking a little bit about our on-site assistance, once we started understanding kind of the technical assistance needs, For those of you that aren't familiar, we do have a Texas Optimization Program, and that program is made up of very talented staff. They're operators, very experienced operators. They're engineers, they're scientists, they're chemists, and so we had those folks go out to a lot of municipal systems that were having a hard time getting back online and getting their water system on, and so they were instrumental. One of the things that happens in flooding conditions is your source water changes. You know, whatever you were operating in those conditions that you were operating under pre-Harvey was not the same after post-Harvey. So it's very quickly that we could all get together and working with operators to get that new treatment process worked out so that we could get that back online. The other thing that we want to make sure that we didn't impact any type of recovery effort, so we have streamlined processes in to expedite emergency authorizations, whether it's for emergency interconnections, new water wells, lines that needed to be repaired. We went ahead and got most of those authorizations out in a 1 or 2 day period. And Office of Air was very instrumental in helping with this because they sent talented engineers over to help us with our workload so we could focus on the emergency authorization. So thank you very much for that. Moving forward, we're going to continue to work with some systems. We still have folks that are not back under normal operating conditions, so we're still spending some time with them. And then also we'll start looking at those systems that had outages. If they're located in Harris or Fort Bend County, they're required to have emergency preparedness plans. So we're going to go back and look to see if there's anything that we can do to improve those plans or if they need to be revised. I know this was kind of not much you can do under 10 feet of water, but certainly we'll take a look at that to make sure that they've got stuff and ready for future preparation. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'll hand it over to David.
Thank you, Carrie Michelle. The agency's response on drinking water, I think, was one of our biggest successes. I know one of the legislative hearings held in Victoria, we had, it was either the mayor or the county judge called out TCEQ specifically and said, thank you. You know, your staff came in, we had a problem with our drinking water system. They stayed all night long and fixed it. And I think that says a lot, so thank you. Next, to talk about wastewater facilities, we have David Glendo, is TCEQ's Director for Water Quality Division. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Kelly, Commissioners. Water Quality Division's participation in the response, began early with preparation. Every year we have an annual survey that we send out to all the wastewater treatment facilities, all the domestic wastewater treatment facilities, get contact information for them so that when we do have an emergency, we have the right people to contact. We also get information from them regarding what redundancy equipment they have in place, how much fuel, how many days of fuel would they have available if they did have to go to generators. And so we use all that information, we upload that into our Homeland Security database, and then in turn that gets put into the EPA's Response Manager database. So we do that every year. We get good participation from the permittees, and so moving forward, we're going to be looking how we can improve permittee participation and having the most accurate data available for us and for the regional offices. We also do mapping prior. So with this initiative, we started generating maps in the few days right at when we knew the storm was going to hit and where it was going to hit. So we started plotting the lift stations within collection systems. And so, City of Houston has a very large number of lift stations, and so we were able to go in, and our GIS folks, with some help from some other divisions, were able to go in and truth those locations and before the regional staff actually have to go out. If they do have to go, we want to make sure that they're going to the right location. And as well as doing the lift stations, we also did the facility front gate locations as well. And then, something that we learned was you need to have the capability to whatever maps you're sending out, that the regional office has the ability to view those in a tablet or a phone or in those kinds of formats. So, immediately after the storm hit, the next couple of days, folks were returning back to the facilities. If, a lot of folks had evacuated, when we were making calls, sometimes the operators were still on their way back to towns that were completely evacuated, to find that their systems were completely inundated with water. And so we were making these calls to get the operational status of the facilities, and many times it was a number of days before they were able to go in and actually view their system, or be able to see the plant. And so we did follow-up calls as necessary to get that information from them. We also had participation from EPA staff that had come to make calls on the wastewater side. So we appreciated their help. And then we also had 25 engineering graduate students from the University of Texas that stepped up to help us make calls, and it was a learning experience for them, and we're hoping we can take advantage of opportunities like that in the future to partner with them. We updated, we did what we could to update the response manager database to make sure that we have accurate information in there. As part of that effort, we're making calls to determine who has structural damage. And the majority of the damage that we did find when we were making those calls was actually due to flooding issues. We also provided technical assistance following the hurricane as well. We were trying to streamline the process where facilities had to go in and make repairs, and so we would provide waivers or technical guidance on that they were making the proper repairs, and then they could come in later and actually do the paperwork for that. We didn't want to hinder their responses. And so we had engineers that were available to provide those responses, or to be available as resources to those folks. And we also had Region 11 shared an engineer with us, which was very helpful to free up our engineers. Another effort that we did until the regional offices could stand up, we were collecting and tracking sanitary sewer overflows information temporarily. And then we also have a pesticide general permit that's out there that's got, that we've issued, that's got emergency provisions in it to allow for communities to respond to mosquito controls and those types of issues without any hindrance to their ability to go out, do the treatment that they need to do, and then come to the agency and complete the paperwork. That concludes our participation.
Thank you, David. Another success was the wastewater activities.
Could I ask a quick question? And I don't know, as we look back at public drinking water and the wastewater systems, and David, you mentioned a lot of it had to do with flooding that caused the issues. I'm wondering if there are things that either through statute or through our rules, I don't want to put too much of a burden on the local communities to, from a cost perspective, but are there things that we could do to change the technical requirements about the way those things are set up, where they'd be better, I guess, bunkered or protected in a future storm event like this? Is that something that we could look at through our rules, or is that something that, I guess what I'm really wondering is if we could go through and sort of categorize on all these failures and where we had inundation, try to pinpoint exactly what the issue was, and are there some small things that we could change that might have an impact going forward to help get those systems back online faster if the next time we get hit like this?
Well, we have our regulations. We do have some opportunities or we do have requirements where you have to protect your facilities from a 100-year flood event. In this case, it was such a large flood. it would be extremely difficult to anticipate and protect for what was this, a 500-year flood event or?
Right, and I guess the
So-
question is that, does that even make sense? You know, from a cost perspective?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I wouldn't, I don't know how feasible that would be. But, you know, we're glad to look at what we do have in place and see if there's anything that we could do to prevent those, or to mitigate those impacts.
Commissioner, I'll give you one example, and I don't think it's a rule change, but I think we need to do more on the front end. On the water systems, they would bring in generators, right? Which can happen very quickly, but if they didn't have the right tether, did I say it right, Kelly? And the right.
It's a harness, but I think it's better a tether.
Tether or harness, they can't hook it up.
Right.
Okay. And so, you know, when it's there, and it takes, I think, right, not an electrical engineer, but somebody to kind of design that thing. It's a requirement that I'm sure if you called Caterpillar and told them you need to bring tether, harness, whatever, they will, but no one knows to do those kind of things. So I think there's things that we need to do on the front end that don't really have anything to do with our rules, but communication-wise, so when it gets there, it already pre-ordered or whatever you want to call it, so you can actually hook it up. I don't know how many times, Kelly, that's happened to us over the years, but it's
A lot, yes.
you know, and that's a simple thing that I think the TCEQ should do. I don't know the right way to do it, but that's something that ought to be automatic.
And
So-
Richard, and along those same lines, I think about the chemical issue, and you know, learning from this experience, going in, we have maybe contracts in place before it hits. So if we need to activate those things and go get them from other places, we have, you know, it's sort of the same idea, I guess.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Commissioners. Next, we're going to hear briefly on the agency's debris management activities. We have two speakers here for this. We have Tim Haase, who is actually designated as the debris management coordinator for the agency for the Harvey response. He's also the North Central and West Texas Special Assistant for the area director. And then we also have Earl Lott. Earl is the director for TCEQ's Waste Permits Division. Starting off on waste, we're going to have Tim speak. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Kelly. Wanted to talk about one aspect of the debris management, and that's the temporary debris sites. So that, you know, Mr. Lott will cover some of the other aspects of debris management. But on the temporary sites are necessary for debris staging, separation, and volume reduction prior to its final disposition. A large portion of the Harvey debris has and will continue to be managed in our temporary sites. But the Harvey debris also gets directly transported to landfills and recycling facilities as well. So it doesn't all go through the temporary sites, although it's a key factor in making sure it happens expeditiously. Early in the event, the DFW Region Office was tasked with reviewing and approving requests for temporary debris sites until the impacted coastal regions could take over that function. The first temporary debris site was approved on Monday, August 28th, and then the coastal regions took over the review and approval function within days or a week or so that followed. So they took that back pretty quick. TCEQ started assisting with the messaging that the temporary debris sites would also need the approval by the State Historic Preservation Office, and in Texas, that's the Texas Historical Commission. And that's relates to the FEMA reimbursement requirements. So the TCEQ started through its region offices and in the Environmental Assistance Division began distributing the FEMA green sheet that included that information about the SHPO approval. And then although we've approved about 213 sites, some were not used, and then some were used for just a short period of time after the disaster. Today, we have approximately 70 sites that remain active. and some of those are gonna take a while to work down. The region offices inspect the temporary sites on a regular basis to ensure they are managed properly and that the debris is working its way through and going to proper disposal or recycling. Approximately 1,600 inspections have been done so far at the temporary sites. And a recent snapshot of the volume of waste that's currently in our debris sites is about 1.4 million cubic yards. That's all I have. I'd say it's all been working pretty smoothly and largely are coming out of the idea that there were workshops done that Michelle mentioned and kind of set the stage on how communities knew how to deal with it, knew who they needed to talk to and what kind of approvals they needed and that kind of thing. So,
Thank you, Tim.
thank you.
Earl?
Thank you. Well, I guess day one that the storm made landfall, Office of Waste staff was on hand to support Office of Compliance and Enforcement in whatever way we could. Day one, we were at their Disaster Operations Center and assisting with the issuance of these temporary debris management sites, as well as doing all the mapping. We mapped all of these sites. We tried to do as much as we could to support OCE and take some of the burden off of the regional staff since they were busy doing recovery efforts. We did all of the mapping of these sites. We mapped them on an interactive web-based system so communities could have access, real-time access to them. Answered a lot of calls from elected officials and provided them guidance, even posted guidance on the web on how to properly dispose of their waste and how it should be handled. The next thing we did immediately was contact all of the landfills within the region to just kind of assess their damage and see if any of them had been inundated with water or damage, and try to get them back in operations as quickly and expeditiously as possible. Part of that outreach, we issued temporary authorizations to at least 26 of the landfills. And these were things like increasing or allowing them to increase the size of their working face just to accommodate the excessive amount of waste that they were experiencing. We worked with them on a lot of their operational requirements. We relaxed some of the leachate management requirements just because of the amount of water that they were dealing with. They couldn't pump it out fast enough, so we relaxed some of those requirements. And also granted some vertical height expansions for these landfills. Then we had a lot of interaction with elected officials, judges, and mayors of communities, and tried to partner them up with different landfills. We encouraged a lot of landfills to continue operating 24/7, even on weekends. A lot of the smaller ones did not have the resources to operate, but we were able to successfully get a lot of them to accommodate community needs. One of the ongoing challenges that we recognized during this event, and it's just something for us to consider as an agency, is we did a capacity assessment of all of our landfills within the impacted regions. And one of the things we noted was the Type 4 landfills, those capable of taking construction and demolition waste, there appears to be a limited amount of space in those. In the Houston-Galveston area, we have at least 15 Type 4 landfills, and the capacity looks reasonable at this point. Beaumont-Port Arthur does not have any Type 4 landfills. Corpus Christi region has one Type 4 landfill, and that's just going to be something that's going to be an ongoing need. As these communities start to rebuild, they're going to have a lot of construction waste as well, so that typically would go to a Type 4 landfill. Now, the Type 1 landfills are able to take it. They're all able to accept this material, but that's not typically what they're designed for. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Earl.
Thank you. And before you move on, I know that Chief Kidd needs to leave. I wanted to thank you for your participation. And even though this conversation ends today, obviously the overall conversation continues on. And so we look forward to partnering with you, and thank you for your teamwork. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Kidd. Next, we're going to move on to Anthony Buck to briefly talk about hazardous materials. But before we start, We've run a little long today. I know there's a lot of really important information. So from this point on, I'm going to ask that we just touch on the high points, and we're going to keep it brief, and hopefully, I think we could probably get out of here in about 15 minutes or so, hopefully. So thank you. Go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to briefly talk about ESF 10, or hazardous materials response. It was very successful. We were able to get 98% of the work done within the mission assignment and also within the 100% reimbursement. These included 266 spills or discharges reported, observed, and responded to appropriately. And also, orphan containers is one of our big missions that we have during a hurricane response. It kind of throws things where they shouldn't be. So we ended up responding to over 1,155 hazmat orphan drums or containers. That's it. That's stuff that's anything that's 5 gallons or above. And all of that was taken care of and taken to the waste pads or appropriately disseminated to the responsible parties. And it was, I believe, a great success story.
Thank you, Anthony. Next, we're going to hear from Corey Chisholm. He's going to talk to us about air quality monitoring. Corey's our Director for Monitoring Division. Go ahead, Corey.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, Commissioners. Just real quickly, I think one of the most common questions we got asked during this response was, why did you take down your air monitors? And obviously, the simple answer is we have a responsibility to protect state's assets. So over the Corpus, Houston, and Beaumont area, we have nearly $5 million in monitoring assets spread out over roughly 48, I believe, monitoring stations. So beginning August 23rd and into August 24th, we had staff that went to all 48 of those stations and prepped those stations, securing the meteorological towers that are about 30 foot tall, bringing those down, securing those, removing external equipment that could get damaged. And then probably the most important thing that people don't think about is actually powering down these instruments and unplugging them so that we don't have an electrical issue and lose expensive equipment. Then within days of the storm's passing, we had staff back out conducting damage assessments and getting these back online. So by September 2nd, I believe Susan said that August 30th roughly is when the Corpus Christi office reopened. So by September 2nd, all stations in Corpus were back online and collecting data. Stations in Houston and Beaumont that did not sustain damage were back online by September 6th and September 8th, respectively. We ended up having 4 stations, 2 in Houston and then 2 in Beaumont, that sustained significant damage and required us to either replace an instrument or to replace a shelter, and that resulted in some extensive data loss. But all total, I mentioned a minute ago, nearly $5 million in assets. The damage was limited to $170,000. So I really can't say enough about the work that staff did in securing those assets. As of September 29th, all stations in those areas were back to 100% operational status, including the ones that were damaged. While these stations were being brought back online, we had both TCEQ and EPA investigators in the field monitoring neighborhoods and around industrial fence lines with handheld instruments. Being able to use those tools allowed us to quickly identify sources where we might have drifting plumes from fugitives or issues, so that then the appropriate action could be taken quickly. We were also able to partner with the EPA and use some of their assets. They have the TAGA, or the Trace Atmospheric Gas Analyzer Mobile Monitoring System, that can actually monitor while it's in transit. And that was a huge benefit, as well as their Aspect aircraft. Results from the data that we collected during the storm, as far as air toxics were concerned, demonstrated that everything that we saw was below a level of health concern. So, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Corey. Next, Mike Wilson.
Sorry, Kelly, can I jump in one more time? And sorry, I feel like I'm making this thing go longer than, so thinking about the Aspect aircraft and sort of the resources that we have, we obviously don't have an aircraft that we have access to, but is there any thought or ability to look at maybe drone technology for that sort of thing that we could actually have as a state?
We can look into, I think part of the limitations with drones, you're gonna be limited in what you can attach to the drone, obviously, because of weight. And I think some of the sensor technologies might be conducive to, as far as their weight and their size. That's something that we would have to invest time and research into, obviously, but I think that's probably going the next step. And Richard, you want to authorize drones flying over places?
Sure.
Okay.
Actually, we
I'm all
already
for
have, well, we already kind of have.
If I get to fly 'em.
Okay, we can work that out. Kelly, we embedded a APD, Austin Police Department drone group with emergency response, and they helped us with, sending out reconnaissance missions. So before we send people out there, Commissioner, I'll tell you, that's where we're going to go. I would love to have a plane. I would love to have a plane. That thing is amazing, and it helped us tremendously. But the cost, I do think we ought to talk about some kind of a mobile monitoring van, not just for emergency response, just in general. The next session, that really would be something we might want to consider talking. And, it's not the cost of the vehicle, it's the gizmos we have to stick in it, That's what's expensive. But like you, I've already thought about that, but I don't know, like Corey said, it's probably the weight of the instruments are not there yet to have a drone that would do that. But reconnaissance, yeah, we're already there, so.
And they come in all shapes and sizes, it's not the little four,
Right.
There's some large ones that may be able to handle that sort of stuff.
There's an initiative at the governor's office to basically look at the drone technology and to work with the FAA to work out how the state would do that. And I think that's probably going to take a few years. When that's done, I think we'll be able to come in behind that and take advantage of that. But definitely, I think that's probably in all of our futures is something like that.
And the APD resources were helpful to point out some of the issues that need to be ironed out with regard to that flight space and making sure that it's safe to operate. And we saw that, and that's going to continue as you have more and more citizen-owned vehicles in the air as well, that oftentimes, even though the flight space is supposed to be cleared, it may not be. And so there's some issues that need to be worked out so that you don't crash your very expensive piece of technology into someone's home, or more concerning, into someone. So,
And what we found most useful, and we were actually criticized about it, which is fine, but a lot of that is because they were just informed incorrectly. We don't have a mobile monitoring van. And, we have mobile equipment that you can move somewhere and then stationarily put it up, and it'll sit there and read measurements, right? Takes about 3 hours to calibrate it and put it up, and then 2 hours on the back end. So to actually use it, it's got to sit there roughly 5 hours, let's say, right? Versus a piece of equipment that, you can move around. Now, we have plenty of handheld instruments, and those have value. But I think if we had that, it would be we could use that, not just, like I said, emergency response. We could probably use that quite a bit, so.
Thank you. Next, we have Mike Wilson. He's our director for our Air Permits Division. He's going to talk to us about refineries. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, Commissioners. And Richard, thank you for clarifying. That's the Austin Police Department with the drones, not the Air Permits Division. So, good clarify. Our involvement was not as interesting. It was more of we received a lot of different questions about what was going on with different facilities and different industry sets in the impacted areas of the state. Particularly the last week of August or the end of August, we started getting a lot of questions about what was going on with the refineries in the impacted areas of the state. So we put together, we went through our database, did a search, put together a list of about 17 sites or locations with 20 refineries, and started contacting them to get the update. Were they operational, operating at reduced capacity, shut down, or planning some sort of startup? And August 28th was the first update table that went out from the Air Permits Division internal to the agency, and for a little over 2 months, we continued to update that table and send it out. Initially, and probably for the majority of that time, we updated that and sent it on a daily basis. As we got further along and more of the refineries were actually operational, we started sending it on a weekly basis, and then finally on an as-needed basis when there were actual updates. By September 7th, most of the refineries were actually operational, operating at reduced capacity, or they were actually in some sort of or form of startup mode. By September the 19th, they were all operational, either at reduced capacity or full operation. The last table update that we sent was November the 9th, and at that point, all of them were fully operational. We had one or two that were at slightly reduced capacity because they had elected to go ahead and perform turnarounds at that time. Looking forward, we've gone through the database, obviously, and put all the refineries in the state on a table, and we've got that information ready to go should there be a need in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm gonna jump in again.
Sir.
Kelly, on the endow process, when you guys are doing your tabletop
Yes, sir.
exercises, are the refineries involved in those sort of, practice runs, so to speak?
Probably not. Anthony?
No, sir, we generally do, it's mostly just endow agency partners. A lot of times we'll just notionalize that, yeah, the refineries are shutting down properly, or sometimes we'll put exercise injects that someone has had a problem and it's gone off-site, and we're hearing about it from a news source or something like that.
So now we have the after-action review for Endow coming up, and Anthony will be a big part of that. That's definitely something we can bring up.
And I'm just sort of, it may not be helpful, but I'm wondering if having, whether it's the chemical council or whoever it is, that so that the industry has procedures in place that is practiced and up to speed when the next time hits. So I know the procedures are in place, but obviously actually kind of working through that a few times before it actually hits the next time might be helpful.
A number of those facilities had to do annual exercises and plans, and I know a lot of our regional office personnel go out there and participate in all of those. And if they were a designated marine facility, the U.S. Coast Guard could come in and have them do an exercise anytime they.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next, we have Beth Seaton. Beth is the director for our remediation division, and she's going to talk to us about Superfund sites.
Thank you, Kelly. So there were questions about Superfund sites, aftermath of the storm, and certainly we partnered with EPA on assessing the sites in Texas. There are 17 state Superfund sites and 34 federal sites that were in the impacted areas. And even prior to landfall, we were working to ensure that those sites were secure, either by making sure that the waste that was on site in drums were either secured or taken off site prior to the storm hitting. And then after the landfall, we did assessments of those. And so with that, of the 17 state sites, we did the initial assessments visual and did sampling at some of those as well. And based on those inspections, we cleared those. We did have one site that had a subsequent sheen detected downstream from one of our sites that was contained after that and has been addressed and is going through its remedial process, and we'll continue to work with the parties on that site. As well, EPA completed assessments of all of their sites, the 34. They cleared all 33 of those sites and then did follow-up work at the San Jacinto waste pit sites where subsequent repairs were needed to damage to the cap. Those repairs have been completed. And EPA is continuing to work with the responsible parties, potential responsible parties, on the cleanup for that site going forward. Certainly, all of that data that we collected and the assessment that we did, we and EPA have posted all of that information to our website, the data and our summaries, and so it's out there for folks to look at and if they have questions. And that wraps up Superfund, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Beth. Next, we have the godfather of dam safety, Warren Samuelson, the CID manager for our dam safety section. and he's going to talk to us about the dam safety assessments after Harvey. Go ahead, Warren.
Well, having seen this thing coming out there and having gone through a number of these in the past, having been here so long, I was concerned about certain dams because I know what is there. But we didn't get any calls, and I began to wonder what's going on here. So we started calling the owners of dams in the impacted area just to see what was happening out there. So we contacted 340 dam owners in the impacted area and found that it was only a small number. Only 20 were damaged that they reported to us. 11 of those were dams that were exempted by the legislature. What we were told is that the tax day flood was worse than this. And you can begin to wonder, when you have 60 inches of rain, how that could even be worse. And I still don't understand all that, but there was really no damage reported. So the dams came out fairly good in this whole process, at least what we know of. Where we see the biggest problem, and y'all are aware of some of this, is having to do with gate releases from reservoirs, whether it's Conroe, Livingston, or Toledo Bend. They made gate releases, and they're making them by their gate procedures they have. Unfortunately, people got flooded, and there's concerns about notification and all this type of thing. And of course, numerous lawsuits have already been filed to address all this, and I assume we will have some follow-up on that in the future. Addicts and Barker became a big point of interest. That is not within our jurisdiction, so I was able to say, no, that's somebody else's, let them deal with it. I think the one thing that I would like to close with is we recently had a problem maximum precipitation study done by our contractor. And we'd had this thing in place for a while and been looking at it, and so we get all this rainfall. So I wrote him an email and said, hey, by the way, do we have any kind of warranty on this thing? Because we seem to have a big amount of rain. And he began looking at it, and we had what is called a problem maximum precipitation event as a result of Harvey. It only affects large drainage areas and high-frequency storms, something in the 96 or 120-hour frequency, which is what this storm was. You have that kind of rainfall, it does affect something that's big. That doesn't affect most of the dams we deal with, so I think it's not going to change anything, and he's going to present new data for us. So it really confirmed the study we had just done. Regardless of what you see in the newspapers, it did confirm what we had seen in our study, that we based that study upon actual rainfall data and not some generalized way of looking at things. And we looked at 68 storms across the state of Texas to come up with the PMP numbers that we're using. And in some respects, it's going down on some dams and it's going up on others. It depends on the drainage area and the frequency of the storm. But it was good that we had no high hazard dams that failed, only had one that was damaged, spillway erosion. So that's a good thing, and it confirms again the study that we had. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Warren.
So to add to Kelly's comment, you know, and I couldn't even tell you which day it is. We're in the office and you're looking at the TV and there's all this talk about all these dams failing and breaching, and you know, so I call Stephanie and I, we call Warren, you know, Mr. Steady Eddie, right? And I go, Warren, there's all these, reports of dam failures, and Warren goes, the rivers are backing up to the dams. And then there was this pause, you know, and are you worried, Warren? No. Okay. That was the whole conversation I had, and it's like, okay, well, if Warren's not worried, I'm not worried. And so anyways, when he said there were, misreports, there were quite a bit of misreporting out there about some of the dams out there, so.
Thank you, Warren. Next, we have Kelly Kill-Linden. She's our area director for Coastal and East Texas, and she's going to talk with us about outreach to local officials. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
In addition to the preparedness and response activities, the regions worked extensively with the local officials. As y'all know, our role was to partner with the locals. We problem solved and we provided customer service. So we moved quickly and we worked cooperatively to identify paths forward, and we continued to work those issues through open communication, ongoing communication, and real-time communication. The regional directors that y'all heard from earlier, they were in constant coordination with county judges. Our staff in the regions, the emergency response personnel, our section managers, they were also coordinating extensively with the appropriate local emergency management planning personnel. Susan Cluis, you heard from, she worked very closely with Representative Hunter, who is chairman of the House Committee on Calendars. Susan participated in several meetings in the Port Aransas and the Rockport areas to help those areas with their debris issues, and our interaction there was very hands-on, and it was greeted with really heartfelt and sincere appreciation from the locals there. As y'all also know, we worked issues that you, the commissioners, identified in your visits to the impacted counties. Y'all reached out directly to the regional directors. The regional directors acted swiftly to move those issues to resolution. Similarly, through Rebuild Texas, issues were identified at the local level, and the regional directors, again, took quick action in partnership and cooperation with the locals to make sure that we could address those issues. So I think one of the truly illustrative examples we have of outreach with the locals is in the Beaumont area when we were dealing with the water outage issue. Sarah Kirksey, our emergency response manager and air manager, she knows who to call, and so she knew exactly who to contact to make sure that we could get the right amount of water pressure to a maximum security prison in lieu of evacuating that facility. So, our efforts are certainly results-oriented. They were driven by the local relationships that our folks, the interpersonal relationships that our folks have in the region within their communities, and just mindful of customer service and providing that service to the folks in those communities that were impacted.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we have Susan Jablonski. She's going to talk with us about information dissemination. Susan, in addition to being the designated water coordinator during the Harvey response of the Water Czar, Susan's also our area director for Central Texas. Go ahead, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Chairman, Commissioners, as you've heard people talk about all of this information that we were collecting, as you can imagine, there were 10,000 site assessments that were done, either through email, through phone calls, through the phone banks, on-site visits with all of our partners that were out there in the field. And so we had a whole lot of information that was going into a data system, and we needed to get a way to timely get it out and make sure that the data quality was accurate. And so it was quite a challenge when you have that many. We had 3 different branches set up that were providing information all throughout the day. This was a 24-hour input of information. And so I woke up with Response Manager every day, and I went to sleep with Response Manager. It's been my friend through this event, and I'm in it every day. I was in it before I came here. So we have a tool that has served us. It's been tested, probably in a way that no one imagined that designing it through the NDOW process that it would be tested. We learned a whole lot, and I think we're going to make a lot of improvements as we move forward with that process. But we were able to provide information to federal partners across the board, including the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, as well as Health and Human Services at the U.S. level, as well as the state level. Of course, TDM, the Water Development Board, the Governor's Office, UT, who was providing maps for the Governor's Office through Space Research. We were part of assisting them, as well as legislative members and congressional members. And so information supplying became a big part of what TCQ was doing. And we needed to make sure that we were funneling that information and not contradicting information from our partners at EPA and other partners that we had out there. So coordination and communication was a key to this. We were meeting daily to talk about that information, to make sure that the frontline individuals had it, that our decision makers, that you had that information timely, as well as the public. And so we were putting up updates daily, and it was a source to get information on public water in particular, maybe where they had nowhere else to go, that they could get those updates from the TCQ on their smartphone. So it was a big part of what we're doing. We're continuing to do it. I think it's really remarkable. Kelly gave you some of the peak numbers of water systems that were completely out and inoperable, as well as operating with issues. We're down to 2 public water systems that have issues, one that was completely destroyed, and another one that is now in an interconnect, and they're making a decision of whether they're going to rebuild and stand up that facility, and 5 under a boil water notice. There's been a lot of interest in why we still have 5, but I think it's remarkable that we're down to 5, considering the level of damage and impact that we were talking about. And it took all of the people that you heard from today and an army behind them to do that. On the wastewater side, we have 3. 2 of those are domestic in nature, but they're serving a very small population base at this point. And those customers are being served by other, whether it be pump and haul or other opportunities in their areas. There are 8 wastewater systems that have issues, including some industrial sites that are making decisions of whether they rebuild those industrial treatment systems or change the way that they're managing wastewater. So we also, I know David Galindo talked about helping out at the very beginning on sanitary sewer overflows. There's been a lot of interest in that, as well as the industrial discharges. So we have been monitoring that, and we put out public health statements on our website and have continued to identify where issues related with discharges are occurring. So I think that's it, Kelly.
Thank you, Susan. Commissioners, we have the lessons learned portion. I can cover the highlight bullets on this within about 2 minutes. And then I can make myself available to come meet with each of you individually, and Richard, Stephanie, to give you more information if you'd like.
I think that would be great. I think that I certainly want to hear that, and I think it'll be useful for us to make sure that there's a method for capturing all the different ideas, some of which are going to be great and some of which there's reasons that they aren't such great ideas, but we need to make sure we put them all on the table and sort through those, and that's what you're good at.
Will do. Thank you. So here are the highlights. What worked well. From our lessons learned, the DERSH concept overall we feel was very successful, and that definitely played a big part in our response. Number 2, the networking drills and the training. Train how you're going to respond. That was huge and worked out very well. Management involvement, vertical integration of all layers of management. Richard and Stephanie on almost every daily phone call. The commissioners or commissioner staff on those calls. That made a big difference, not only to me, but I know for the regions and other staff, having those discussions daily with TCQ management all the way up the chain. We didn't have that with Ike, and I could tell a big difference, and thank you. Also at the state level, we all briefed the governor almost daily at some point, so there was a lot more involvement top down for Harvey, and I think that was that really helped. I think the collaboration with EPA this time around was unparalleled. It was very successful. And that's a comment not from me alone, but from everybody. These are coming from the group. Information sharing, information dissemination, we posted on our website, the best we've seen, and that's what everybody has indicated. That really worked well. We did a good job, and the folks responsible, Ryan and his group that did that, did it well, and the folks that Susan and her folks that put that up there, great job. Our relationship with military forces, the National Guard, the Civil Support Team, Texas Civil Support Team, Arkansas Civil Support Team, the State Guard, where we had the State Guard's engineering group come out and help us. Force multiplier, fantastic, worked really well. Those are a few of the highlight bullets. What didn't work so well, probably need to improve on. we always have this timekeeping, and our reporting PCA codes. We can do better, and we'll work on that. It's a continual process. Documenting our cost tracking. We had some hiccups there. I think we probably had ourselves doing a little bit more work than we needed to capture the information. So we're going to streamline that and make it a little easier. I think we've come a long way from Ike, but I think we can even get better on that. So that's less of a burden on our folks. Some of the documentation that we collect, the use of 214 forms, it's a FEMA term. It's a daily accounting of what your activities are, what equipment you use. Sometimes we used it, sometimes we didn't. We want to help standardize that and strengthen that process. So a lot of the administrative documentation things that we can improve on. Response manager worked really good in some areas. It's a really good concept. I believe in it. I think it'll work when it gets fixed. We had some major problems with it, as Susan had indicated. The only reason it did work is because she worked past midnight many times to get the information pulled together. There were some reporting features that were just broken and never got fixed. There was no drop-down menus, and so if you enter an accounting name and you just spell it, it's gone. So things that we can fix, the control issue on who's requesting what and what's being put in there, we're going to get a handle on that. We know what went wrong. I think we'll fix it or we'll replace it, but I think we'll get it done. We're going to have our after-action review on that separately soon, and I think that's already been scheduled. And then the other thing, debris management. We all know we can do better on our outreach to local governments. We've done a lot in the last 2 years. I think we can always do more, and so we're committed to do that. And then the last thing is that to make sure that we revise our debris management forms and our procedures. Definitely, we'll do that as well. Suggestions for improvement. Work with the city counties on the temporary debris management sites. Need more hotspots, laptops, iPads, cell phones is something we hear. One of the things that the way we're going to address that is I've asked Anthony to look at getting a box full of burner phones so we can show up. This is something we don't have to pay for all the time, maybe a pay-for-use, inexpensive, not an iPhone, just a flip phone, a way to communicate that we can hand out to the region staff so they don't have to use their personal phones. Some of the ideas like that will definitely make the hotspots and laptops more efficient. So iPads worked really well. Need more, but I think with what we had, it worked well, and I think definitely that's something we'll keep working on. The last, actually two more bullet points. Public information officers, the media requests. We probably need to expand that concept to where there's somebody assigned to every region to help not only take in and address the media requests for information, but also to help us tell our story. We did a lot of really good things, and we don't always get to tell it to everybody, and we just need, I think if we worked on that, that would be great. The last suggestion for improvement would be, this is Anthony Buck, to create incident management teams that would be individual from the DURSTs. So if we had maybe 3 or 4 of these teams, they could come into a region or a unified command location and basically be the command and control, fill those command positions. And then we could have that select group that we send off individually to get that further in-depth training to do that. And we would pull from some of the senior staff and mid-level and junior staff to fill that. And so those are the high points. I definitely make myself available, or anyone else here in the discussion today, to come talk to you more on that. So apologize for running long. We had a lot of information, but thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone else that came today and helped us tell our story.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for the report, and it's worth the time we've spent in it and more, and so it's critical to have these discussions. And thanks to all the staff. This has been, again, remarkable to see the way the state's responded, but certainly, especially the way the agency has responded. That I think it's telling, similar to what Warren talked about with regard to the performance of the dams, and we see as bad as this storm was and as intense as this storm was, the way things worked out were much better than they could have been, and that's because of the preparation. That's because of the planning and the lessons learned have been applied. So this agency's response, I'm extremely proud of how everyone has stepped up. And again, it's that preparedness, that practicing and putting into place. But even more important is the personnel and that commitment to professionalism and to, when we have staff that their own homes are underwater or damaged and they're showing up at work every day to help Texans dig out of the mess that we're in. That's very indicative of, I think, what the typical TCEQ personnel bring to the table. And so that's why I think this agency has done so well, and I'm certainly proud to be a part of it. So thank all of you for your role in that. Colleagues, any last-minute comments on this item?
None for me. Don't have anything to add to that. Thank you. Well said.
Yeah, and Kelly, just thank you for putting this together. It was really good.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to visiting you and get some individuals from each of us individually. Would be great. So.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
See, we did have item number 2, a discussion of public water systems and enforcement policy relating to notice violations scheduled for consideration today, but I'm going to continue that item indefinitely at this point. And then we also are not going to meet in executive or closed session. So with that.
Very good. With that, it's 12:31. We are adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.
Oh, good. Being a child myself.